The news hit Yuzhou City like an explosion. Fairy Qin was coming. In the Great Shang Dynasty, everyone knew that name. Qin Yahello, the plum blossom, sword immortal. She was beautiful, powerful, and arguably unrivaled in this world. But she wasn't coming for a vacation. She was looking for a personal disciple. For months, she had traveled through a dozen cities and found no one who met her standards. Now, she was headed here for one reason, a rumored genius. In this world, there were 5 legendary youths everyone talked about: the Buddhist Sun Sanzang, the divine Sun Yin Xiaoyu, the saintess Huolinger, and our own 4th prince, Mubai. But those 4 already had masters. Inside the largest tavern in Yuzhou, a storyteller named Tua Mengfei slammed his folding fan down, drawing every eye in the room. A burly man at a nearby table shouted out, "You said there were 5 geniuses. You only named 4. Who's the last one?" Tua Mengfei took a slow sip of tea, enjoying the suspense. "Do you know who owns the largest merchant house in our dynasty?" "Everyone knows that," the man grumbled. "The Li family of Yuzhou. They're richer than the empire itself. What does that have to do with anything?" The storyteller smirked. "It has everything to do with it. Li Baiwan, the head of the Li family, has a son named Li Zai. He is a peerless talent, easily on par with the Buddhist Sun or the divine Sun." A scholar in the corner scoffed loudly. "Keep dreaming. How can a merchant's son compare to living legends?" Tua Mengfei glared at him. "I'm not talking nonsense. Do you know the sword freak? When he visited Yuzhou recently, Li Baiwan tried to get his son admitted as a disciple. The sword freak took one look at Li Zai and refused. He said, 'The Li family boy has the bones of a sword immortal. My humble sword is not worthy of being his teacher.'" The tavern erupted. People couldn't believe it. Outside the entrance, a young man dressed in fine silk paused, listening to the commotion. His servant whispered, "Young master, these storytellers just want attention. How could a merchant family produce a sword genius? Once Fairy Qin arrives, someone with your martial talent will surely be chosen instead." The young man in silk shook his head. "He's not lying. The sword freak actually said those words. That's why I'm here. I want to try for Fairy Qin, but I also want to see if this Li Zai is truly as brilliant as they say." Over the next few days, the rumors spiraled out of control. It started with talent, but soon people were claiming Li Zai was born clutching a sword. They said the sky turned purple when he took his first breath. Then the stories got even wilder. Some claimed that at 10 years old, he created a sword technique called Tai Chi that made the wind and thunder howl. Others swore he recently leveled an entire mountain with one swing, which was why the Plum Blossom Sword Immortal was coming to find him. By the end of the week, people were saying he was about to ascend to godhood. In reality, the center of all this chaos, the Li estate, was less of a house and more of a private city. The Li family wasn't just rich, they held more wealth than the national treasury. Their meteoric rise over the last decade was fueled by strange, revolutionary items: perfumes, glass mirrors, and soaps. Nobody knew where these ideas came from, except for the Li family inner circle. They knew it was all because of the young master, Li Zai. He had been different since the day he was born, inventing things this world had never seen. But despite being born with a literal diamond spoon in his mouth, Li Zai didn't look happy. In the backyard of the massive estate, a 16-year-old boy sat in a pavilion in the middle of a lake. He wore clothes woven with gold and silver thread, looking every bit like the pampered son of a billionaire. He held a fishing rod, staring at the water with a deep, heavy melancholy. This was him. This was the legendary Li Zai. On the shore, a disheveled old man with a messy beard and a sword leaning against his leg turned to a chubby middle-aged man. "Old Li, you better not back out on those 10 jars of flower wine you promised me." The old man was Zhang, better known as the Sword Freak, one of the most powerful men alive. The man next to him, dressed in extravagant silks, was Li Baiwan, Li Zai's father. While I looked like a refined young noble, my father, Li Baiwan, was the definition of a nouveau riche social climber. He wore rare cloud brocade from the south, jade from the north, and sat on a tiger skin chair from the western regions. He even clutched a black pearl from the eastern sea. His outfit alone cost a fortune. If there had been any space left on his body, He would have draped himself in more gold just to make sure everyone knew he was loaded. Old Zhang, my father asked the messy old swordsman, do you really think China Lu is coming? Can we trust the rumors? I don't know, Zhang replied, taking a swig of wine. I did what you asked. Whether she shows up isn't my business. My father looked at me, sitting lonely in the pavilion, and sighed. Old Zhang, tell me the truth. Does my son really have no talent for martial arts? None, Zhang said bluntly. I heard them from across the water. I turned back and shouted toward the shore. Old Zhang, you've seen the world. Isn't there some heaven-defying manual or a divine pill that can change a person's bones? Something to make me a genius. Zhang set his wine jug down. There's no manual, but there is one way. Do you want to hear it? My father and I both leaned in, eyes wide. What is it? Dreaming, Zhang said flatly. I stared at him, speechless. Kid, don't look so depressed, Zhang added. I can't teach you, but that doesn't mean China Lu can't. Her realm is higher than mine. She might have a way. But first, you have to convince her to take you as a disciple. I nodded. That made sense. She was basically a goddess. She had to have some tricks up her sleeve. My father looked guilty, feeling like he had failed me. I boarded a small boat, standing at the bow while a beautiful maid paddled me to shore. I looked like a character out of a painting. Zhang watched me and shook his head. He was starting to regret lying just to get 10 jars of wine. He wondered if he was ruining his reputation for a drink. When the boat docked, I stepped off and patted my father's shoulder. It's okay, I whispered. I'm useless, my father groaned. I have all this money, but I can't give you what you really need. Don't blame yourself, I said, gazing at the lake with a dramatic, moody stare. Money makes the world go round. Even old Zhang gave in for wine. When China Lu gets here, we'll give her whatever she wants. If she refuses, we'll bury her in gold and silver until she changes her mind. 3 days later, the Plum Blossom Sword Immortal arrived. A massive wave of sword intent swept across the outskirts of Yuzhou City, stretching 30 yards wide. Plum blossoms rained from the sky. A stunning, ethereal figure descended, standing atop a flying sword. The crowd went wild. The Sword Immortal is here, the citizens screamed, their faces full of worship. As the wind died down, China Lu landed. She looked like a goddess who had stepped out of a scroll, eyes like a painting, dressed in flawless white silk. She was so beautiful it felt unreal. Goddess, I love you. You're my idol, I shouted from the middle of the crowd. I was leaning into the role of a fanboy, waving my arms and screaming at the top of my lungs. But I must have been too loud. The people around me stopped cheering and stared at me like I was an idiot. They all took a collective step back, leaving me standing in a wide, empty circle. Goddess, I love. I cut myself off, the last word dying in my throat. Why was everyone quiet? I thought this was how you welcomed a superstar. Isn't that Li Baiwan's son? Someone whispered. Is he a moron? I didn't know the richest kid in town was a total airhead, another added. You don't know anything, a third person countered. He's a genius. Geniuses are always weird. It's called having a personality. I realized I had made a scene. Without a word, I covered my face with my sleeve and bolted. That was embarrassing. Up front, China Lu glanced at my retreating back, a thoughtful look in her eyes. She probably thought I was a fool. Back at the Li estate, I found Zhang by the lake with his eyes closed. Did you see her? He asked. I saw her, I muttered, rubbing my nose. Well, is she worthy of being your master? I stared at the old man for a long time. Old Zhang, are you mocking me? Yes, he said, nodding. You're one to talk, I snapped, sitting down next to him. You sold your dignity for 10 jars of wine. Tell me, is she really as powerful as you say? She looks so young. Martial arts isn't about age, Zhang said calmly. You have to accept that some people are born geniuses. China Lu is the best of the best. Must be nice, I sighed. Everyone has strengths and weaknesses, Zhang said. Don't be obsessed with what you can't do. Then what's my strength? I asked. Zhang was silent for a long time. Finally, he spoke. You're good looking. You've got a great exterior. You're getting better at insulting people, I said with a fake smile. He was basically calling me a hollow shell. Am I wrong? Zhang asked. I heard a maid snuck into your room again last night. Are you still a virgin? Get lost, I barked. Being handsome wasn't my fault. It was a burden. I sat up straight, my expression turning serious. I've decided. I'm going to make her my master. I'll step onto the path of martial arts and become invincible. Zhang opened his eyes and looked at me. Are you serious? Totally. To be young, Zhang sighed. Even your daydreams sound powerful. I ignored the old man. Just then, a servant ran up to us, looking frantic. Young master, the master wants you in the front hall. The sword immortal is here. I jumped to my feet. I didn't wait. I sprinted toward the house. Young people, Zhang muttered, closing his eyes again. No patience. In the main hall, my father was acting like a total sycophant. He was hovering over Qina Lu, desperate to please her for my sake. Goddess, is the tea to your liking? He asked, bowing. I have the best cloud mist tea, or perhaps some wine. I have 20-year-old daughter's red. Anything you want, just say the word. I walked into the main hall and saw my father acting like a total sycophant. I wanted to crawl into a hole and die. It was embarrassing. My father was practically vibrating with desperation to please Qina Lu. The goddess must be tired from her travels, I said, stepping forward with a smile as bright as a blooming flower. I've learned a bit of massage from the manners doctor. How about I help you relax? No need. Qina Lu didn't even look at me. Her expression was cold, unaffected by our family's brand of hospitality. She stood there like an untouchable statue. I think you both know why I'm here. My conditions for taking a disciple are simple. You must pass my tests. What kind of tests? I asked, suddenly serious. My father, Li Baiwan, leaned in close, his ears practically twitching. Get back, I said, pushing my father's face away. Your head is too big, you're blocking my view. My father gave a sheepish laugh and retreated 2 steps. He didn't mind. He just wanted me to succeed. 3 tasks, Qina Lu said, looking at the strange dynamic between us. Complete 3 things, and I will accept you as my disciple. 3. I felt a sting of worry. This woman wasn't going to be easy to fool. That's a lot. I won't make you do them all at once, she continued. I will give you time. Today is the first test. She stood up, her movements graceful and fluid. You have 1 day to find or forge a sword. It must be unique, crafted with unparalleled skill, and unlike any other. She didn't offer any hints. She didn't say another word. She simply turned and floated out of the hall like a ghost. My father and I exchanged a look. Is she throwing the match? I asked, confused. Everyone knew my dad was loaded. I could buy 10,000 swords by sunset. But she said it has to be unique, my father muttered, looking worried. I rolled my eyes. Dad, don't be so naive. A unique sword is an open-ended question. The answer is whatever she says it is. I suddenly remembered something important. Wait, did you give her the silver yet? My father slapped his thigh, his belly jiggling. I was so busy serving tea, I forgot. How do you forget the most important part? I groaned. Find out where she's staying. We need to send the bribe immediately. No need to search. A voice called out from the doorway. It was Li Yue, my older sister. She walked in with a calm, composed air. I had people follow her the moment she entered the city. She's at the welcome inn. Sister Yue, you're the best, I said, grinning. Not like Dad. He's useless. Li Yue smiled softly. Your taste isn't bad, little brother. This Qina Lu is beautiful and has a good figure. She looks like she'd bear strong children. First, become her disciple. Then, make her your wife. It's a good plan. My father and I both coughed. That was a bit blunt. Anyway, I said, changing the subject. The inn. Is there anything special about it? It's one of our properties, she replied. Nothing special, except for one thing. It's the most expensive place in town. It means our sword immortal likes the finer things in life. Perfect, I said, turning to my father. Get the gifts ready. Make them expensive. I want her to feel our sincerity in her soul. My father nodded and hurried off. I turned back to my sister. Yue, I need you to deliver the gifts. I don't trust anyone else with this. She nodded. Your business is the most important business in this house. As the sun began to set, Li Yue arrived at the inn alone. She knocked on the door, and Qina Lu opened it. My sister didn't waste time with small talk. She walked in and placed a bundle on the table. She opened 3 boxes, one by one. A night pearl from the Eastern Sea, she said. Value, 100,000 gold. Heavenly silk armor, she continued. Impermeable to blades, fire, and water. Value, 1,000,000 gold. And the fish gut sword, she finished. A legendary relic of the ancient kings. Priceless. 3 treasures of the mortal world sat gleaming on the table. Li Yue turned to leave, but paused at the door. Does the immortal have any guidance for my brother? Qin Lu stayed silent for a long moment. Finally, she spoke. Tell him to do his best. That night, I stood in the courtyard looking at the stars. I felt poetic. Money makes the world go round, I whispered. And if it doesn't, you just haven't spent enough. Inside the house, my father watched me through the window with tears of pride in his eyes. My son is a genius, he whispered. The next day, the air was filled with plum blossoms. Qin Lu arrived, looking like a goddess descending from the heavens. I stepped forward and presented her with a sword made of solid, pure gold. It was so shiny it was blinding. She took the gold sword, stared at it for a long time, and then nodded. Impressive, she said. A true swordsman cares not for the blade, but the spirit. To reach the highest realm, even a fallen leaf can be a sword. Being too obsessed with the quality of the tool is a trap. This answer is acceptable. You pass. My father and I shared a secret look. She didn't admit she took the bribe. I didn't admit I gave it. It was a perfect arrangement. Before she left, she gave me the second task. Within 1 day, create your own sword style. I almost laughed. This was a gift. The whole city knew I had invented a style called Tai Chi when I was 10. She was practically handing me the victory. You got this, son? My father asked, vibrating with excitement. It's in the bag, I said, waving him off. I headed to the backyard to go fishing. Old Zhang was there, eyes closed as usual. Did you pass? With a gold sword, I said, sitting down. Zhang opened his eyes, looking shocked. She accepted a golden hunk of metal? Of course not, I smirked. My sister sent her a night pearl, silk armor, and the legendary fish gut sword last night. My dad really broke the bank this time. The fish gut sword was in this house. Zhang sat bolt upright. Where else would it be? I tossed a pebble into the lake. If we didn't show her the good stuff, why would she let me slide? Money makes the ghost turn the millstone, Zhang. Even a sword immortal has a price. I'm impressed, Zhang muttered. She looks so holy, yet she's just as greedy as the rest of us. We're all human, I said. The price was just high enough for her to look the other way. And the second test? Zhang asked. I'll show her a new style tomorrow, I said. Zhang looked at the water. She's always cared about her reputation. Isn't she afraid that taking a spoiled brat like you as a disciple will ruin her name? Of course she's afraid, I said. That's why she traveled across the whole kingdom before making a choice. She wasn't looking for a genius. She was looking for the highest bidder. I chuckled softly. I didn't spend all that money on rumors just because I had extra cash to burn. So what? Old Zhang frowned. Qin Alua won't believe you're a peerless genius just because of some gossip. She's here, isn't she? That means she believes at least part of it, I said, a strange smile touching my lips. I really don't get you, he muttered. It's called psychological suggestion, Zhang. Why do you think history is full of foolish rulers? It's not that they can't see the world. It's the slander from corrupt officials and the whispers of concubines. Eventually, you believe what you keep hearing. I picked up another pebble and tossed it into the lake. Even the test she gave me today was influenced by those rumors. Creating a new sword style in 1 day? Even a grandmaster would struggle with that. She has her doubts, so she wants to see if the legends are true. If I pull it off, I'm not just a genius. I'm a genius who knows how to show respect. Why wouldn't she want a disciple like that? Old Zhang fell silent. He stared at me for a long time before finally speaking. Kid, I underestimated you. Your strength isn't just your looks or your family's wealth. Your ability to read people is terrifying. Qin Aluo isn't just letting you slide. You're guiding her to do it. I laughed. Most things in this world can be solved with silver. For the things silver can't buy, I have this face. Look at me. Don't I look the part? There's a saying, a good face covers a lot of flaws. If I stood on the street right now and told people I was a talentless waste, who would believe me? I stood up straight by the lakeside, letting the breeze catch my hair. My brows were sharp, my eyes bright. I looked exactly like the peerless young master the world expected me to be. Old Zhang sighed. He knew I was right. In the world of cultivation, everyone looked decent, especially the heirs of great sects. If they weren't naturally handsome, their aura made up for it. He took a sip of wine, looking almost gleeful. He wanted to see the look on the holy sword immortal's face when she finally realized I couldn't cultivate a lick of martial arts. Anyway, old Zhang, I said, changing the subject. Have you thought about my offer? Join the Li household. Become our honored guest. Kid, your family has money and good wine. Zhang replied with a faint smile. But I like my freedom. Besides, your family is just a merchant house. You have enough hired muscle for most problems. Why waste money on an old man like me? That was the past, I said, my voice turning cold. The tall tree catches the wind. 10 years ago, we were just wealthy merchants. Nobody cared. But now, our wealth makes people jealous. Even the emperor in the capital is watching us. My latest intel says the third prince, Mu Yao, has arrived in Yuzhou. He's looking for a chance to strike at us. The imperial family? Zhang took another drink. That's bad news. Your father is getting old, and you spend your days doing nothing. If something happens to him, your sister is too kind-hearted to hold this family together alone. Kind-hearted. I blinked, a strange expression crossing my face. My sister, Li Yue? That was certainly one way to describe her. Back in the study, my father, Li Baiwan, was looking over account books. Li Yue stood beside him. You've done well, my father said, smiling. Your talent for business has already surpassed mine. It's all thanks to my brother, she said softly. Without his inventions, we'd just be ordinary merchants. It's a pity his heart is set on the martial path. He's always wanted that, my father sighed. Whatever he wants, I'll get for him, Li Yue said firmly. Even if I have to pluck the stars from the sky. You spoil him too much, my father joked, then turned serious. Yue, do you know about Prince Mu Yao being in the city? I know. The emperor sent him to sniff around our foundation. He won't find a thing, my father stated. There's more, Li Yue added, her eyes turning cold. Mu Yao is a skilled swordsman. He likely wants to apprentice under Qin Aluo as well. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. I'll have him killed, she said, her voice flat and decisive. I'll make sure it's clean. No traces. My father gave a bitter laugh. You're always like this when it comes to your brother. Don't worry, he already knows. If he hasn't said anything, it means he's confident he can beat the prince himself. Just make sure the prince doesn't find the things we want to keep hidden. I understand, father, she nodded. That night, under a bright moon, a knock sounded at Qin Aluo's door at the Moon Inn. Prince Mu Yao entered, looking every bit the noble warrior. He presented a wooden box. Inside lay an ancient sword, its sheath radiating a faint, chilly aura. Immortal, this is my answer, Mu Yao said. The famous sword, Hongguang. Qin Aluo said, barely glancing at it. The third prince is generous. You've passed the first test. Mu Yao kept his face calm, hiding his joy. He knew the first test was about attitude. As a prince, the sword immortal had to give him some face, but he wanted to leave a lasting impression for the challenges ahead. You know the second test, Qin Aluo said, her gaze steady. Tomorrow at noon, wait for me at the Li estate. The Li estate? Mu Yao stiffened. He wanted to protest, but he swallowed his words, bowed, and left. Left alone, Qin Aluo stood by the window, looking out at the quiet city. Her face was ethereal, untouched by the world. Behind her on the table sat two boxes, one containing the cold light of Hongguang, and the other, the legendary fish gut sword. The candles burned low that night, casting long, flickering shadows against the walls. The cold air lingered, and the night passed in a heavy, silent crawl. When the sun finally rose, veiled by thin clouds, the Li estate prepared for its most distinguished guest in history. Prince Mu Yao of the Great Shang dynasty was coming. It was an immense honor, or at least, that's what my father, Li Baiwan, kept shouting. He was practically bursting with joy, his round belly shaking with every laugh as he personally greeted the prince in the front hall. I watched from a distance as Mu Yao, the most powerful man in the dynasty, treated my father with surprising politeness. They sat and chatted for a long time, wearing masks of courtesy. Eventually, Mu Yao glanced toward the courtyard and smiled. I wonder, the prince said smoothly, is the young master of the house in? My father's smile widened. My son? He's a clumsy boy, your highness. I was afraid his rudeness might offend you, so I didn't summon him. But since you've asked, I'll have someone fetch him immediately. Father barked an order to the servants, and a runner scrambled toward the back garden. The third prince wants to see me? I was sitting by the lake, lazily holding a fishing rod, when the news reached me. A slow, bright smile spread across my face. It was time to put on a show. I walked into the front hall dressed in my finest Yunzhou silk, a piece of East Sea jade hanging from my waist. I made sure every step looked elegant. I wanted to look like a fallen immortal, refined, untouchable, and brilliant. Even the saints of the great sects would have had to admit I looked the part. I was an expert at looking impressive. When Mu Yao saw me, a flicker of surprise crossed his eyes. He was clearly thinking that the rumors of the genius of the Li family weren't just hot air. This must be Brother Zai, Mu Yao said, standing up before I could even speak. He was incredibly gracious. This humble commoner, Li Zai, greets the third prince, I said, acting appropriately flustered. I made a big show of adjusting my sleeves and straightening my robes, looking like I was about to perform the most solemn, grand bow imaginable. Brother Zai, there's no need for such formality, Mu Yao said, catching my arm to stop me. He laughed. We aren't in the palace. Let's skip the tedious etiquette. I straightened up immediately. I hadn't actually planned on bowing that low anyway. Thank you, Your Highness. We sat down across from each other. I heard of your fame long before I arrived in Yuzhou, Mu Yao said, studying me. Seeing you now, your grace is truly extraordinary. You flatter me, I replied softly. Your Highness is the one whose virtue is known throughout the world. I've admired you from afar for a long time. We exchanged these pleasantries like old friends, but it was all fake. We both knew we were rivals for Qin Aluo's apprenticeship. I've heard your swordsmanship is unparalleled, Mu Yao said, taking a sip of tea. Perhaps you could show me a thing or two. I smiled humbly. How could I dare claim to know anything about the sword in front of you? Don't be modest, Mu Yao pressed. Everyone in Great Shang knows you're a prodigy who created his own technique. Even the elders praise your talent. Rumors are just rumors, I laughed. Your Highness is the true master. How can a mere firefly like me compete with the bright moon? My father sat there, mouth open, smiling and nodding but staying out of the conversation. Mu Yao set his cup down, his brow furrowing slightly. He was realizing that both my father and I were like oily stones, hard to grasp and impossible to pin down. Your Highness, I asked, taking a sip of tea, how many divine treasuries have you opened? In the world of martial arts, the body has 5 major energy gates called the 5 divine treasuries. Legends say those who open all 5 can move mountains and drain seas. I've opened 3, Mu Yao answered honestly. I let out a breath of feigned envy. What a gap between us. And you, Brother Zai? He asked. Not even one, I said with a grin. Mu Yao looked stunned. You're joking. I wouldn't dare joke with a prince, I said. That's why I'm so desperate to become the Sword Immortal's disciple. I hope you can understand. Mu Yao's eyes narrowed. After a moment, he smiled thinly. That is for Immortal Qin to decide, isn't it? Quite right, I agreed. I invited him to stay at the estate for a few days so we could show him proper hospitality. He couldn't really refuse. The Li family had grown too rich, too fast. The imperial court was getting nervous, and Mu Yao was here to scout us out. He was wondering if I was lying about my cultivation. I watched him think, hiding my own smirk. My family had to be careful. The old emperor was a fox, and he was finally looking to move against us. We sat in silence, drinking tea and nursing our own dark schemes. As the sun began to set, plum blossoms suddenly started falling from the sky over the estate. She was here. I stood up immediately. Mu Yao followed suit, his eyes fixed on the sky. A surge of sharp sword intent swept through the air. Qin Aluo descended, treading upon a flying sword, her robes fluttering like a celestial being. She looked incredibly cool. I couldn't hide my envy. Why did I want to learn martial arts? To fight? No. I wanted to look exactly like that. I wanted to be that stylish wherever I went. She landed gracefully in front of us. My father immediately turned into a sycophant, bowing low with his face full of forced smiles. Mu Yao gave a dignified, royal salute. Old. I started, the words Old Qin almost slipping out. I caught myself and shivered, swallowing the words. My father turned pale beside me, his legs wobbling. Qin Aluo noticed our weird reaction and frowned, but she didn't ask. No need for small talk, she said coldly. Let's begin. Mu Yao and I looked at each other. Brother Zai, you first, he offered. Oh, I wouldn't dare, I said, waving him off. After you, your highness. Mu Yao didn't push. He took a sword from his attendant, and the moment his fingers gripped the hilt, his entire aura changed. He went from a gentle prince to a sharp, lethal blade. His movements were like thunder and rainbows. Zai, my father whispered, poking my arm. I can't tell. Is he any good? I have no idea, I whispered back. But it looks really impressive. Qin Aluo must have overheard us. The third prince of Great Shang has the soul of a sword, she said quietly. My father and I exchanged a worried look. If she liked him this much, I was in trouble. Was she going to pick him over me? But then, her tone shifted. The technique is good, she evaluated. But unfortunately, most of the moves follow a set pattern. They aren't original. Mu Yao bowed. All martial arts under heaven share the same roots. It's not strange to see similarities. I hope you can see the effort I put into these strikes. I saw the shift in Qin Aluo's tone and realized she was actually impressed by Mu Yao's derivative skills. I cleared my throat and offered a fake, generous compliment to show how magnanimous I was. I wanted to look like the bigger person. Qin Aluo glanced at me for a moment, her cold eyes lingering, before she nodded slightly. She told me that since I had spoken up for him, Mu Yao had passed this round. My jaw twitched. I felt like slapping myself right then and there. My big mouth had just helped my rival. Your turn, Qin Aluo said, a tiny, almost imperceptible curve touching the corner of her mouth. I pushed aside the urge to strangle myself and took a sword from my attendant. I stepped forward, passing Mu Yao as he walked back. Our eyes met for a split second, a silent, intense collision, but neither of us said a word. I drew the blade. The air around me grew still. I focused, letting the weight of the sword settle in my hand. Back in the rear courtyard by the lake, old man Zhang, that scruffy drunkard, looked toward the front yard and smiled. He knew what was coming. Taiji, a sword style of effortless flow. He didn't believe for a second that a kid like me had actually invented such a legendary technique, but I wasn't telling him my secrets. In the front yard, I began. My movements were slow, then suddenly fast, shifting at precise, rhythmic intervals. It was the Taiji sword, a style of no desire, no conflict, and total mastery. Mu Yao froze. His face went pale with shock. How is this possible? He whispered. Taiji, Qin Aluo murmured. Even she looked shaken. She had heard rumors of my strange sword style, but seeing it was different. As I moved, the sword became a blur. My defense was impenetrable, my strikes were like lightning. Above me, the sky began to change. Thunder rumbled in the clear air, and strange, colorful clouds began to swirl. Qin Aluo looked up, her shock deepening. This was a heaven and earth resonance. She hadn't seen a phenomenon like this in years. The last time was when the master of the heavenly prison temple in the western regions reached a breakthrough. That man was a powerhouse who had opened 5 divine treasuries. Seeing it now, coming from me, a guy who claimed to have no cultivation, convinced her that my talent was limitless. I finished the form and sheathed the sword. The thunder faded. The clouds vanished. Did you really create this sword technique? Qin Aluo asked, finally finding her voice. I gave her a half-smile, playing the mysterious part. A celestial being taught it to me in a dream. I lied. She nodded, not pushing for more. In this world, celestials were just powerful cultivators anyway. Did I pass? I asked, trying to look hopeful. You passed, she said. She looked at both Mu Yao and me. There is one final test. Tomorrow at midnight, the two of you will duel. The winner will be my disciple. My heart sank. Mu Yao, on the other hand, let out a breath of relief and smiled. He thought he had already won. My father, Li Baiwan, stepped forward, looking panicked. Goddess, that's not fair to Zai. He hasn't opened any energy gates. Fair, Qin Aluo said coldly. There is no absolute fairness in this world. The winner takes all. Prepare yourselves. Night fell over Li Estate. I sat by the lake with old man Zhang, watching the moonlight dance on the water. Old Zhang, I said, is there really no way? None, Zhang said, shaking his head. Mu Yao has opened 2 divine treasuries. You have opened 0. The gap is too wide. My family has money, I whispered. I can get you anything. Rare weapons, enchanted armor, whatever you want. It won't matter, Zhang replied. He paused, staring at the lake. Unless you send someone to kill him tonight. I thought about it for a second and nodded seriously. Good point. Old Zhang, name your price. He chuckled. I'm not that low-class kid. 100 jars of 100-flower wine, I countered. He's a prince of Great Shang, Zhang sneered. Do you think I'm stupid? 200. Impossible. 500. Zhang went quiet. I don't like killing people. 1,000 jars, I said, hitting my limit. Plus 500 jars of top-shelf Nurahong. Deal. Zhang stood up and started walking away. Old Zhang, I called out. He turned around, asking if I regretted it. No, I smiled. Just don't kill him. It's not the right time to start a war with the Emperor. Just mess him up. He snorted and vanished into the darkness. Late that night at the moon coming in, Mu Yao was calmly polishing his sword by candlelight. His servant suggested he get some rest, worried the Li family might try something. Don't worry, Mu Yao said with a smug smile. The Li family is smart. If anything happens to me here, they're finished. They wouldn't dare. As the servant left, a cold wind blew through the room. The candle flickered. Mu Yao stiffened. Suddenly, the door burst open from an invisible force. A masked figure stepped inside, moving so fast it looked like he was gliding. Who are you? Mu Yao barked. The man who's taking your life, the masked man said. The pressure coming off him was suffocating. Goddess help, Mu Yao screamed, throwing himself backward. He knew Qin Aluo was staying in the same inn. That was his only hope. Qin Aluo, old man Zhang chuckled under his mask. He lunged, his hand clamping onto Mu Yao's throat like a vice. Upstairs, Qin Aluo heard the cry. Her eyes snapped open, and she vanished from her room. Back in the second-floor suite, Zhang squeezed Mu Yao's neck. I am the 3rd prince. Mu Yao gasped, his face turning purple. If you kill me, you're dead. Zhang didn't say a word. He just punched Mu Yao square in the chest. A massive surge of energy tore through the prince's body. Mu Yao coughed up a spray of blood, his strength vanishing instantly. Just then, a sharp whistle of air cut through the room. A streak of sword chi flew toward Zhang's back. He let go of the prince and flipped away just in time. A lock of his hair drifted to the floor, severed by the strike. Qin Aluo stood in the doorway, her gaze locking onto Zhang. The air in the room felt like it was about to explode from the tension. The plum blossom sword immortal, Zhang said calmly. Impressive. Until next time. He kicked off the floor and dove out the window. Qin Aluo didn't hesitate. She leaped after him, 2 shadows racing across the rooftops of the city at breakneck speed. Zhang suddenly stopped, turned, and fired a blast of sword chi from his fingers. Qin Aluo raised her hand, meeting the attack head-on. The sound of the collision echoed through the night as Qin Aluo blocked the attack head-on. She recognized her opponent's style immediately. In a city like Yuzhou, only one person possessed this level of sword mastery. The sword maniac, she whispered. Old man Zhang chuckled from the rooftop, his mask hiding his face, but not his amusement. Not bad, goddess. You've got a sharp eye. He leaned forward, his voice dripping with irony. But tell me, how did the famous Plum Blossom Sword Immortal end up as a glorified bodyguard for the imperial family? Qin Aluo didn't flinch. Her voice was cold as ice. I could ask you the same. I never thought the world-renowned sword maniac would become a common assassin. Who is your master? Is it Li Zai? Zhang laughed heartily. You really think highly of that kid, don't you? My freedom isn't for sale, and the Li family's gold isn't enough to buy my soul. Qin Aluo frowned. If it wasn't the Li family, who else would dare to strike at the 3rd prince? She tightened her grip on her sword, but Zhang wasn't interested in a long fight. Are we going to keep dancing, or can an old man go home? Without waiting for an answer, he stepped into the air and vanished into the darkness. Qin Aluo stood alone on the street, her eyes tracking his path. She didn't chase him. Their cultivation levels were too close. Unless she fought to the death, she couldn't force him to stay. She wondered who could possibly command such a man. Back in the Li family's backyard, I was waiting impatiently. When a shadow flickered and landed near me, I jumped to my feet. Old man Zhang pulled off his mask, looking quite pleased with himself. Is it done? I asked. When I handle things, they stay handled, Zhang said, grinning. The third prince won't be able to crawl out of bed for at least 10 days. But kid, aren't you worried about the emperor's revenge? I smiled back. Of course I am. But the court has been squeezing my family for years. It's only a matter of time before they try to destroy us anyway. Zhang narrowed his eyes. You've got guts. Honestly, even if I hadn't stepped in tonight, I bet someone else would have. You're a magnet for trouble. Who knows? I shrugged. Maybe the heavens just wanted to humble the royals. Don't forget my payment, Zhang reminded me. 1,000 jars of flower brew and 500 jars of daughter's red. Not a single drop less. Whenever you're thirsty, old Zhang, it's yours, I promised. He waved me off and headed to his room, muttering about how being around me made him feel like he was being plotted against. I didn't stay long either. I headed back to my study, but when I pushed the door open, I found Li Yue waiting for me in the candlelight. Sister, what are you doing here? I asked. She didn't say much. She just pushed a wooden box across the table. Inside lay a slender, elegant longsword. What's this? A poison blade, she said calmly. The toxin is colorless and odorless. It only activates when it touches blood, causing the victim's energy to collapse instantly. The effect lasts for 15 minutes, then it vanishes completely. No one can track it, and no one can cure it. I was stunned. Where did you get something this lethal? Your second brother sent it today, she replied. My mouth twitched. My second brother was a ghost. I hadn't heard from him in so long, I thought he might be dead. I thanked her, and after she left, I stared at the blade. The glint of the steel reflected the dangerous light in my eyes. The next day, the atmosphere in Yuzhou was electric. The Li family had invited every influential person in the city to witness the final result of the apprenticeship. My father, Li Baiwan, and my sister were all there, standing in the front courtyard. We waited as the sun climbed to its peak and began its slow descent. Finally, Qin Aluo arrived. She descended from the sky, treading on her sword like a celestial being. Her grace was unmatched, her beauty enough to make the world stop turning. But there was a problem. One of the main characters was missing. The crowd started to get restless. Where's the third prince? Even the sword immortal is here, yet he dares to be late? He's a prince, not the emperor. This is disrespectful. As the sun touched the horizon, it became clear Mu Yao wasn't coming. My father, my sister, and I shared a silent look. We knew exactly why his bed was more appealing than this courtyard right now. Fair goddess, my father said, hiding a smirk behind a polite bow. The prince has failed to show. The time is up. Qin Aluo looked at me. She didn't waste words. Li Zai has passed the trial. He is the winner. I pumped my fist in my mind. Yes. She walked toward me, her gaze serious. Are you willing to take me as your master? I gave her my most dazzling smile. From this day forward, through wealth or poverty, for better or worse, I wish to be your disciple. I will be loyal and never leave your side until the end of my life. Goddess, are you willing? It sounded a bit like a wedding vow, and I saw her eyebrows knit together in confusion, but she didn't suspect a thing. In front of the entire city's elite, she nodded. I am willing. Behind her, my sister smiled like a blooming flower. I could almost hear her thinking that Qin Aluo had walked straight into my trap. But by the next morning, things spiraled out of control. Rumors were flying through the streets faster than a speeding arrow. I was sitting in the backyard when a servant ran in, panting, to report the latest gossip. They're saying I performed a Tai Chi sword dance that caused a heavenly phenomenon. I asked, spitting out my tea. And that the goddess said I have the soul of a sword immortal? Old man Zhang looked at me skeptically. I didn't tell them to say that. I protested. I just wanted the news of the apprenticeship to spread. I have no idea where the rumors about us becoming a cultivation couple came from. I believe you, Zhang said dryly. Actually, no, I don't. Just then, another servant burst in, his face pale. Master, the goddess is here. My heart dropped. Asterisk, oh no. She's definitely here to kill me for those rumors. Asterisk. I didn't even have time to process the panic before a shadow flickered across the courtyard. Qin Aluo appeared by the lakeside in an instant, her movements so fluid it felt like she had folded space itself. She didn't look at me. Her cold, piercing gaze was fixed entirely on old man Zhang. "You really are here," she said, her voice like ice. Zhang opened his eyes and gave a lazy smile. "It hasn't been that long, goddess. Only 2,000 years since our last chat." She stepped forward, ignoring his sarcasm. "I'm curious. Why are you helping this boy?" "Money," Zhang replied naturally. "Money makes the world go round. Besides, didn't you go easy on him because he gave you the fish gut sword and that celestial silk armor?" Qin Aluo went silent for a moment. She straightened her back, her expression serious. "I took him on because I saw his talent for dancing." "A talent for dancing?" Zhang burst into a fit of laughter that echoed off the water. I started coughing, nearly choking on my tea. It was the most ridiculous thing I'd ever heard. Zhang looked at her with a glint of pure mischief in his eyes. "Tell me, goddess, have you actually checked his meridians yet?" She frowned. "Why would I? I can see his vitality. His blood and qi are overflowing. His potential should be limitless." "That's what I thought too," Zhang said, his grin widening. Qin Aluo realized something was wrong. She lunged forward and grabbed my arm before I could pull away. As she probed my internal energy, her face went from calm to pale, then to a shade of livid red. Zhang couldn't hold it back anymore. He started howling with laughter. He had been waiting for this moment for a long time. "All 8 of his major meridians are completely blocked," Zhang wheezed. "His energy can't move an inch. No matter how much blood and qi he has, he's just a human pressure cooker. In the boy's own words, he's a bomb waiting to self-destruct." "You both lied to me," Qin Aluo hissed, dropping my arm. Her eyes were flashing with dangerous light. "We didn't lie about anything," Zhang shouted through his laughter. "We never said a word. You just chose to believe your eyes and those ridiculous rumors on the street." I rubbed my nose, feeling incredibly awkward. I hadn't expected the lie to blow up this fast. I looked away, trying to avoid her murderous stare. She was shaking with rage, her chest heaving as she glared at us like she wanted to erase us from existence. "It's too late to back out now," Zhang reminded her, sounding far too happy about my predicament. "You announced him as your disciple in front of the entire city. If you quit now, you'll be the laughingstock of the empire. Why not try to unblock his gates? It's a much better challenge than teaching a genius." I looked at her, trying to sound as sincere as possible. "Goddess, if you can help me open my meridians and start my cultivation, I don't care about the cost. My family has everything, especially money." Qin Aluo took a deep breath, slowly regaining her composure. The damage was done, but then she looked at me with a chilling smile that made my skin crawl. "I took a disciple because of a bet," she said quietly. "The leader of the Vermilion Bird sect, and I have a wager. In 3 years, my disciple must fight his. If you lose, the consequences will be more than you can handle." I swallowed hard. "Who is his disciple?" "Huoliner," Zhang replied, his grin turning into a smirk. "One of the 4 great geniuses of this world. He makes that 3rd prince you fought look like a toddler." I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. I was dead. I was absolutely, 100% dead. The silence by the lake became heavy and suffocating. We were in a total deadlock. Qin Aluo had a useless student, and I had a master who was basically sending me to my execution. Without a word, I turned around and jumped straight into the lake. The water splashed over me as I sank. I just wanted to stay down there and drown. It felt easier than facing 3 years of hell followed by a public beating. Zhang and Aluo watched the bubbles rise to the surface. "You better think of something," Zhang warned her. "This kid has no bottom line. If you leave him like this, he really will just forfeit the match in 3 years and ruin your reputation. He's capable of anything." Qin Aluo narrowed her eyes. "What if he trains his physical body? External martial arts? Look at his skinny arms," Zhang scoffed. "Without qi to temper the flesh, he'll never amount to anything." She went quiet, thinking for a long time. Finally, a cold light flickered in her eyes. "There's one way. We forcibly break his meridians." Zhang's smile vanished. "Are you insane? A normal person's meridians are fragile. If you break them, he dies." "Not if he has enough medicine," she countered. "He said his family is rich. Every time I break an inch of his meridians, we use hundreds of rare herbs to repair the damage. We keep breaking and repairing until the path is clear." Zhang looked horrified. That's the worst plan I've ever heard. Do you think he can survive that? The pain of having your insides shattered thousands of times is something no human can endure. We'll see, she said flatly. Suddenly, Zhang looked at the calm surface of the lake. Wait, where's the kid? Did he actually drown? Yahello frowned. She didn't dive in. She simply raised her hand. A massive surge of energy erupted from her, and she swung her hand like a blade. The entire lake split in two. The water rose up like two massive walls, creating a dry path straight to the bottom. I was sitting on the lake bed, holding my breath, when the water suddenly vanished. I looked up at the towering walls of water on either side of me and nearly jumped out of my skin. What the hell? I screamed, scrambling backward. Zhang sighed in relief. The brat is still alive. I climbed out of the muddy lake bed, staring at Yahello with wide eyes. Seeing that kind of power up close changed everything. I wanted that. I needed that. You want to learn? She asked. I nodded so hard I thought my head would fall off. It will hurt a little, she said, her voice completely devoid of emotion. I can handle a little pain, I promised. I had no idea what I was agreeing to. Zhang muttered something under his breath about me being a dead man. Yahello turned to the estate buildings. Tell your father to start buying medicine, she commanded. I'll write a list. Get as much as you can. How much is as much as I can? I asked. She pointed to the large guest house behind us. Fill that entire building to the ceiling. Then we can start. I stood there, frozen. Even for a guy with a mountain of gold, that was a lot of medicine. I realized then that my life as a pampered rich kid was officially over. Is medicine some kind of cheap vegetable you can just pick up at the market? I asked, my voice cracking slightly. Yahello didn't even look back. You don't have to prepare it, she said indifferently. But if you don't, then in 3 years, just wait to be beaten to death by Huolinger. She turned and walked away, leaving me standing there in a daze. I looked over at old Zhang, who was leaning against a tree. Old Zhang, what is she planning? Do you know? No idea, he said, shaking his head quickly. He looked like he was just enjoying the show. I just watch. I don't get involved. I watched her retreating back, a heavy sense of dread settling in my stomach. I had a very bad feeling about this. Half a day later, in my father's study, Li Baiwan stared at the list of medicines I'd handed him. His face, thick with layers of fat, started to tremble. How much? He stuttered. My little brother said she wants a whole building full, Li Yue said softly from the side. Holy crap, Li Baiwan shouted, unable to stop himself from cursing. My sister, Li Yue, took the list from him and smiled. I'll handle this, father. I'll find a way to get the money. Li Baiwan looked at her with concern. Yue, do you know how much silver this is going to cost? I know, she replied calmly. It's just silver. Nothing is more important than my brother's dreams. Li Baiwan sighed and shook his head helplessly, though a small smile tugged at his lips. Fine, I'll leave it to you. Within 2 hours, every pharmacy in Yuzhou City was wiped clean. A day later, mysterious buyers appeared in 3 neighboring cities, buying out hundreds of drugstores. 10 days passed, and suddenly, there wasn't a single high-grade herb left for sale in half of the Great Shang Empire. The terrifying wealth of the Li family sent shockwaves through the world. While the world was reeling, I wasn't at home. I was at the Wellai Inn, sipping tea. I wasn't with my cold master, though. I was sitting across from the 3rd Prince of Great Shang, Mu Yao. Please, Your Highness, I said, raising my cup with a smile. I had come to visit him under the guise of concern. He had been assassinated and injured recently, and I figured I should play the part of a worried friend. I've wanted to visit since the attack, I said smoothly. But I was afraid of disturbing your recovery. I hope you don't take offense that I waited until today. Brother Li is too polite, Mu Yao said. He smiled, but I could feel the coldness behind his eyes. He knew. He couldn't prove the Li family was behind the hit on him, but he wasn't an idiot. Still, now wasn't the time for us to tear off our masks. What are your plans, Your Highness? I asked, testing the waters. Will you return to the capital once you've healed? No rush, he smiled. Since I'm here, I'd like to see the sights of Yuzhou. I'll likely have to trouble you to show me around. I narrowed my eyes. This guy wasn't leaving. It's no trouble at all, I lied. I'd be honored. Mu Yao poured me another cup of tea, acting casual. I heard a rumor in the capital. They say the Li family's perfume, glass, and soap businesses were all your inventions from when you were a child. Is that true? I burst out laughing. Of course not. How could you believe that? Those businesses have been running for 10 years. I was just a brat back then. Those are just stories storytellers used to trick the commoners. Muyao chuckled. I guess I was fooled too. He paused, setting the teapot down. Has the Li family ever thought about taking on partners for these businesses? There it was. The real reason he was here. The imperial court wanted a piece of our pie. I took a slow sip of tea, pretending to think. I rarely handle the business side of things. But I heard my sister say we've hit a bottleneck. To grow further, we might need the right partners. Muyao's lips curved upward. The court had been trying to suppress us for years, but we were too big. Now, they wanted to infiltrate us from the inside. I have some excellent connections, Muyao said. If you're willing, I can introduce you to the Zhangsun family, the Merchant Alliance, and the Yin family bank. My heart skipped a beat. So those three giants were all controlled by the throne. That was valuable information. I knew he wasn't giving me a choice. He was giving me a list of people I had to pick from. I'll have to discuss this with my father and sister, I said, standing up and bowing respectfully. I'll give you a satisfactory answer in a couple of days. I'll wait for your good news, he said, smiling as he saw me out. I hurried back to the Li estate and burst into my father's study. Li Baiwan and Li Yue were hunched over ledgers. How many times have I told you? My father started to yell, but he stopped when he saw it was me. Oh, it's you. You never come to the study. I ignored him and looked at my sister. Sister, do we do business with the Zhangsun family, the Merchant Alliance, or the Yin family bank? A little with the alliance and the bank, she said, confused. Nothing with the Zhangsuns. What? They're backed by the imperial court, I said seriously. The room went silent. My father and sister exchanged a grim look. Are you sure? My father asked. The third prince told me himself. It's a trap. My sister frowned. We've spent years trying to keep the government out of our business. If they get their hands on our throat now. Don't worry too much, I interrupted. There's an opportunity here. The prince gave us 3 choices. That means these 3 giants are already jealous of each other. We can only pick one partner. My plan? Let them fight each other for the spot. My sister smiled. You're smarter than you look. Even if they all serve the emperor, they aren't one big happy family. They'll claw at each other for the profit. Exactly, I said, stretching my arms. Anyway, you guys handle the boring business stuff. I'm going to be a sword immortal. How's my medicine coming along? Almost ready, she said softly. I have people scouring every city for the rest. Don't worry. You're the best, sister, I said, giving her a quick hug. I felt a lot better. All right, I'm off to find my wife. I gently tapped my sister's forehead and laughed. My wife? You mean old Qin? Yeah, I'm going to go find her right now. I need to know when my training starts. I'm about to become a sword immortal. I left the study with a swaggering, arrogant grin, heading straight for Qin Aoyuo. As soon as I was gone, the warm smile on Li Yue's face vanished. Her expression turned cold as she looked at my father. Father, I think my brother's suggestion is perfect, she said, her voice sharp. Let those 3 imperial lapdogs tear each other apart. We'll watch from the sidelines, eat away at their influence, and buy ourselves some time. Li Baiwan nodded slowly. It's a solid plan. If necessary, we'll have Qingji strike from the shadows to fuel their suspicion. Li Yue thought for a moment. A lot has happened lately. It's time for my second brother to come home, but we must keep his identity hidden. The world knows the Li family has 3 siblings, but Li Qingji is a ghost. No one has seen his face. They both knew the truth. So did I? My second brother was the master of the Yinyu Tower, the fastest-growing assassin organization in the Great Shang Dynasty. My father's wealth had funded it for 10 years, creating a hidden blade to counter the imperial court. Ironically, I was the one who had originally suggested creating the tower. Li Yue sighed. That was exactly why Qingji hated me. He was a true martial arts genius, a prodigy who reached the level of a grandmaster at a young age. But because of my plan, he had been forced to live in the shadows for a decade, his name synonymous with blood and darkness. I knew he resented me for it, which was why I always gave in to him and never talked back. I searched the backyard until I found Old Man Zhang by the lake. Hey, Old Zhang, where's Old Qin? I shouted. A cruel smirk played on his lips. Right behind you. Yeah, right, I scoffed. You think I'm... I turned around and froze. Qin Aluo was standing right there, her face expressionless. My inner sycophant immediately took over. I flashed a huge, fake smile. Immortal Master, when did you get here? Just now, she said flatly. What do you want? The medicine is ready, I said, buzzing with excitement. When do we start? Now, she replied, walking toward the pharmacy. So soon. I hurried after her. As I passed old man Zhang, I winked at him and mouthed the words, I'm going to be a sword immortal. The old man didn't say a word. He just closed his eyes with a chilling grin. He knew what was coming. Women hold grudges, and he suspected Qin Aluo's method was pure revenge. To shatter every inch of a person's meridians, let them heal, and repeat it 100 times? The thought alone made him feel refreshed. Inside the pharmacy, the servants had prepared a massive wooden tub. They poured in boiling water and baskets of potent medicinal herbs. Strip, Qin Aluo said, looking at me. I hesitated, clutching my collar. Isn't this a bit inappropriate? I know you're my teacher, but I'm a grown man and... Shut up, she snapped. She didn't wait for an answer. She grabbed my arm, shredded my clothes with a flick of her wrist, and slammed a palm into my shoulder. A surge of energy exploded through me, instantly shattering the meridians in my right arm. A scream like a dying pig echoed through the mansion. Before I could process the agony, she hoisted me up and threw me into the scalding medicinal bath. Qin Aluo, you hag! I screamed, the boiling water and the broken arm driving me into a frenzy. I cursed every word I knew. If you can still yell, you have plenty of energy, she sneered. A little pain won't kill you. She grabbed my other arm. With a violent squeeze of her chi, she shattered the meridians in my left arm too. Another blood-curdling scream ripped through the air, making the servants outside tremble with fear. By the lake, old man Zhang took a long swig of wine and started humming a happy tune. The immortals come to my home, to grant me long life. At sunset, Qin Aluo walked out of the pharmacy. Half an hour later, I was carried out. I looked like a dead dog. My father and sister rushed to my room, followed by the family doctor. He just fainted, the doctor said, checking my pulse. He'll be fine. My father breathed a sigh of relief, but Li Yue sat by my bed, her eyes filled with pain and a hint of anger toward Qin Aluo. She couldn't understand why the training had to be so brutal. Late that night, I finally opened my eyes. The room was quiet. My sister was still there. Sister, I whispered. You're awake. She leaned in, her face full of worry. Does it still hurt? Not at all. I lied, trying to look relaxed. It's late, go get some sleep. I'm not in a hurry. I made your favorite lotus seed soup. She sat me up and fed me one spoonful at a time. I ate in silence, my heart aching. In this family, my sister treated me better than anyone, even my father. She handled the grueling business empire while I played the part of the useless son, dreaming of swords. I felt a deep sense of guilt. Sister, I started to say. Rest now, she interrupted gently. Don't overthink. As long as you are happy, I am happy. She left the room, leaving me alone in the dark. I lay there, my resolve hardening. I knew the imperial court was closing in on us. The Li family wasn't strong enough to fight them yet. But if we had a sword immortal, everything would change. I didn't care how much it hurt. I had to protect this family. I wouldn't let the Li estate fall. The next morning, I crawled out of bed at dawn. At breakfast, my hands were shaking so badly, I couldn't even pick up my chopsticks. My meridians were still a mess of pain. Zai, don't rush it, Li Yue said softly, watching me struggle. My sister brought the food directly to me, her voice filled with gentle comfort. I nodded, not saying much, and quickly shoveled a few mouthfuls down before standing up to leave. Zai, what's wrong? My father asked, his brow furrowed in confusion. My sister sighed softly, her eyes tracking my exit. His mind is heavier than we imagined, father. I didn't stop. I walked straight to the room where the sword immortal stayed. I stood before the door and knocked firmly. Immortal master, I called out. The door creaked open. Qin Aluo looked down at me, her expression as cold and distant as ever. What is it? I'm better, I said, forcing a grin despite the exhaustion. We can continue. She studied me for a long moment. Your meridians haven't fully recovered yet. Are you sure your body can handle it? I'm sure, I said, nodding with absolute certainty. Then let's go. She didn't waste another word. She stepped out and headed toward the pharmacy. I followed her immediately, without a hint of hesitation. Half an hour later, my screams tore through the pharmacy again. The pain of shattering meridians is something no one should have to endure. It felt like my very soul was being ground into dust. But I gritted my teeth, my heart set like stone. I wouldn't break. Down by the lake, old Kai sat silently, sipping from his wine jar. For once, he wasn't gloating. I think I finally surprised him. He probably expected me to run away after yesterday's bone-deep agony. He didn't realize how stubborn I could be. Half a day passed before the pharmacy door opened again. Chin Aluo walked out, a thin layer of sweat on her brow. Immortal Master, my voice drifted out from the room. I hadn't passed out this time. She stopped and looked back. What? Aren't you going to teach me? I asked, my voice thick with fatigue. Can you even stand up? She countered. I can. She nodded and kept walking. It took me nearly 30 minutes just to drag myself out of that room. I cleaned myself up, straightened my robes, and tied back my long hair. I had to look the part of a refined young master, even if I felt like a walking corpse. I found her waiting by the lake. When she saw me approaching, she asked, What is a sword? A weapon, I answered. She frowned. Wrong. Answer again. A king among weapons, I tried. Wrong. Again. Her voice grew sharp, demanding. I fell silent for a long time, thinking about the pain, the stakes, and the cold reality of this world. Finally, I spoke slowly. A sword is a tool for killing. Correct. She nodded. Suddenly, the air around her shifted. A sharp, whistling energy erupted from her body, sending ripples across the quiet lake. A sword is a tool for killing. Therefore, no matter how elegant the technique, it has only one purpose. She reached out her hand. From a distant room, an ancient sword flew through the air and landed perfectly in her grip. With a single motion, she swung. A terrifying wave of sword chi exploded outward, literally cleaving the lake water in two. I stared, breathless. Even though I'd seen her power before, it still shook me to my core. The essence of the sword is speed, accuracy, and focus, she explained calmly. And the essence of a sword strike is nothing more than a swing and a slash. She looked me in the eye. From today on, you will practice only 3 moves: the swing, the slash, and the thrust. 1,000 times each, every single day. Not one less. You will do this until your first strike is perfect, without a single error, until it becomes a pure instinct of your body. I cupped my fists and bowed deeply. Understood. Seeing my formal respect, her expression softened slightly. If you can reach the level I speak of, even if you never open your meridians, there will be very few martial masters in this empire who can ignore your blade. Old Kai watched us from a distance, drinking in silence. He knew she wasn't lying. Very few people in the world had the discipline to master the basics to that degree. She was giving me a sliver of hope, and I was going to take it. This sword is named Green Frost, she said, handing the ancient blade to me. You may use it for now, but every swordsman needs their own blade. You must find one that truly belongs to you soon. I took the sword, feeling its weight. Thank you, immortal. She turned and walked away, leaving me alone by the lake. I didn't waste a second. I began to practice, one strike at a time. You actually lent him your sword, Old Kai remarked as Chin Aluo approached him. He must be special to you now. I didn't think you'd take him seriously so quickly. The moment he walked out of that pharmacy on his own, he earned the right to learn from me, she replied coolly. Do you really think he can walk the path of martial arts? Old Kai asked, his voice turning serious. I don't know, she said. But based on today, unless he actually dies, he won't give up. Kid's a fool, Old Kai grumbled. Could have lived a rich, easy life, but he chooses to suffer like this. Chin Aluo didn't respond. She just watched me. Everyone has something they are willing to die for. She saw that I was fighting to protect something. As the sun began to set, I was still there, drenched in sweat. My clothes and hair clung to my skin. My arms screamed in pain, the meridians still raw and damaged. Every swing felt like a hot iron was being driven through my bones. I could see blood beginning to seep through my sleeves, staining the fabric red. My sister, Li Yue watched from afar. I knew she wanted to stop me, but she knew my character too well. She stayed back. By the time I finished my 3,000 repetitions, the sun had vanished. I stumbled back to my room in a daze and collapsed onto the bed, my consciousness fading into blackness. As night fell, old Kai was about to head in when he suddenly froze. He looked toward the edge of the darkness, his eyes narrowing. A powerful presence was approaching. A young man in a silver-gray robe emerged from the shadows. His face was cold, his expression like stone. He radiated an icy aura that made the servants shiver as they scrambled to bow. "Second young master," they whispered in shock. Li Qingji didn't look at them. He walked straight toward the study. Old Kai watched him go, his eyes squinting. So this was the legendary second son of the Li family. To have such a high cultivation at such a young age, the Li family was full of surprises. Inside the study, Li Qingji bowed respectfully. Adoptive father. Eldest sister. My father and sister both looked relieved to see him. "Qingji, you're back," my father said, his voice warming. "May I ask why you summoned me?" Li Qingji asked calmly. My father looked at my sister. "Yue, you tell him." She stepped forward. "Qingji, you know about the third prince coming to Yuzhou. Beyond seeking an apprenticeship, he's here to test our strength. The imperial family wants to stick their hands into our business." She laid out the situation, the powerful families in the capital and the banks they were trying to force us to partner with. We were being backed into a corner. "What do you need me to do?" Li Qingji asked after a moment of silence. "I'm going to the capital soon to negotiate with these three families," she said. "I need you to send people to secretly sabotage the relationships between them. Can you do it?" Li Qingji nodded. "I can." "Qingji," my father added, his voice firm. "You must only send others. You cannot show your face or get involved personally." "I understand, father," he replied. Once he left, my father stood by the window, watching his silhouette disappear. "Qingji is getting colder by the day. If anything ever happens to me, Yue, you're the only one who can keep this family together." "Father," she started, but he held up a hand. "Qingji has his resentments, but he cares for this house. And deep down, I think he still cares for Zai." He gave a bitter smile. He wasn't sure about much, but he knew one thing. I was the heart of this family, and I was the one pushing myself to the brink to save us all. My second brother, Li Qingji, never had a kind word for me. Early the next morning, I was by the lake practicing my sword strokes. The air was cool, and the water was still. Suddenly, I saw a figure in a silver-gray robe walking toward me from the other side of the shore. It was him. I opened my mouth to greet him, but my vision blurred. Before I could even blink, he covered 30 feet. He was a blur of motion. I reacted purely on instinct, bringing my sword up to block. A sharp pain shot through my hand as his fingers struck my wrist like a hammer. My sword flew from my grip and clattered onto the grass. I stood there, stunned, my hand throbbing. "You can't even hold your own sword," Li Qingji said, his voice cold as ice. "Useless." He didn't wait for a response. He just turned and walked away. Not far off, Qin Aluo and Old Man Zhang were watching. They didn't say a word. They had seen how terrifyingly fast the second son of the Li family was. At his age, his cultivation was nothing short of monstrous. I stood by the lake and silently picked up my sword. Usually, I'd have something witty to say, some way to talk my way out of a loss. But today, I stayed quiet. I didn't argue. Further away, my sister, Yue, caught up with him. "Qingji, he's trying hard," she pleaded softly. "Give him some time." "Sister, how long can you and father protect him?" Li Qingji's expression remained indifferent. "If he stays this useless, father will eventually lose everything because of him. Zai brought the Li family to this height," she sighed. "He's trying to protect this home now. Just have a little patience. Bringing glory is one thing," he replied, looking back at me with cold eyes. "Not having the strength to keep it is his greatest sin." Back at the lake, I handed the sword back to Qin Aluo. "Goddess, can I take half a day off? I'll make up the missed practice sessions when I get back." She didn't ask why. She just took the Qingxuang sword and nodded. "Go." I thanked her and hurried off to find my siblings. Even though I'd just been humiliated, I put on my usual cheeky grin as I approached them. "Second brother, you're back." He stared at me. "Finished practicing?" Not yet, I said. I promised the third prince an answer today, so I have to meet him. You know your sister is going to the capital? He asked. I nodded. I know. The capital is a den of wolves, he said, his voice dropping an octave. This should have been your responsibility. Because of your incompetence, she has to go instead. Do you understand that? You're right, brother. I'll reflect on it, I said, sounding as humble as possible. I was a master at accepting criticism without actually changing. I'll be following her in the shadows, he continued. Yujo City is in your hands while we're gone. Don't worry, brother. I nodded so hard I looked like a woodpecker. I was the picture of an obedient little brother. Nobody would ever guess I was the notorious troublemaker of the Lee family. Go then, he said, his expression softening just a fraction. The third prince is calculating. Be careful with him. Thanks for the concern, brother. I'll be careful, I chirped, feeling genuinely happy he cared, before scurrying away. Yue watched me leave and shook her head. You're too harsh on him. He really respects you. He's the only legitimate heir, Li Qingji said flatly. He has to carry more weight than anyone else. It's his fate. He paused. I'll look for a proper sword for him. I heard some ancient blades surfaced in the East Sea and southern border. If I have time, I'll go get one. Yue smiled. You always act tough, but you have a soft heart. Later, at the Yulai Inn, the third prince, Mu Yao, finished dressing and came downstairs. I was already waiting for him outside. After you, your highness, I said politely. After you, brotherly, he replied with a smile. We walked through the bustling streets of Yuzhou. The city was different from the capital, raw, lively, and a bit wild. Kids ran through the crowds, and the air smelled of street food. Have you thought about my proposal? Mu Yao asked, acting casual as he took in the sights. The Li family wouldn't dream of refusing your kindness, I told him. My sister will be heading to the capital soon to discuss the partnership with those three families. Mu Yao looked surprised. Your sister? Are you not going? I never touched the family business. I lied effortlessly. My sister and father handle everything. My father is too old for the trip, so she's going in his place. That's a shame, Mu Yao said, looking genuinely disappointed. I was hoping to host you in the capital and share some wine. There will be other chances, I assured him. He nodded, a small smirk playing on his lips. I knew what he was thinking. He was disappointed I wasn't coming, but he knew how close I was to my sister. If she got into trouble in the capital, I'd have no choice but to show up. We spent the rest of the afternoon walking and talking. It was a game of mental chess. Every word was a probe, every smile was a mask. We acted like old friends, but we were both trying to squeeze information out of the other. Finally, I bid him goodbye and headed back to the Li estate. I collapsed next to old man Zhang in the backyard, wiping sweat from my face. Tired? The old man asked. Talking to someone that manipulative is exhausting. I sighed. You have the nerve to call someone else manipulative? He snorted. Old Zhang, you wound me, I said seriously. I treat everyone with total sincerity. Even the dogs in Yuzhou wouldn't believe that lie, he laughed. I was about to snap back at him when I felt a chill down my spine. A sword whistled through the air and slammed into the ground right in front of my feet. Break time is over, a cold voice said from behind me. I jumped up instantly and grabbed the hilt. Starting now. Old man Zhang took a sip of wine, watching me struggle. Qin Aluo stood nearby, her eyes tracking my movements. Sword nut, she said after a long silence. What if I found him an opponent? Zhang nearly choked on his wine. You trying to kill him? He's only been practicing for a few days. Even with your energy and medicine fixing his body, his meridians are still blocked. He can't even cultivate yet. A real fight would end him. Qin Aluo didn't blink. A gem isn't polished without friction. At this rate, he'll never catch up to the prodigies like Huolinger. He needs real combat. She looked toward the horizon. I heard there are bandits in the mountains north of the city. In a few days, I'll send him there. Old man Zhang's jaw dropped. This woman was insane. Those bandits were killers who lived by the blade. She wasn't training me. She was throwing me to the wolves. With my current strength, going up that mountain was a death sentence. I didn't know the miserable fate waiting for me, so I just kept practicing my sword strokes over and over, enjoying the rhythm of the steel. For the next 7 days, my life was a cycle of medicinal baths and sword practice. I was tortured to the point of collapse every single day. There were moments I thought I wouldn't be able to stand back up. But beneath that brutal, inhuman treatment, my meridians and physical strength were skyrocketing. I was far surpassing any normal person, inching closer to becoming a true martial artist. A week later, my eldest sister, Li Yue, was ready to depart. My father, Li Baiwan, personally escorted her all the way to the gates of Yuzhou City. Despite being the one closest to her, I never showed up to say goodbye. "Aren't you going to see your sister off?" Old man Zhang asked. He was lounging by the lake in the back garden, watching me sweat as I swung my sword with everything I had. "No," I replied, not breaking my form. "My second brother is protecting her in the shadows. She's safe enough." Old man Zhang chuckled. He probably thought I was even weirder than him. Suddenly, Qin Aluo walked toward us. "Come with me," she said. I stopped and looked at her, confused. "Where to?" "I've prepared some training for you," she answered. "Is it dangerous?" I asked instinctively. "Just a little exercise," she said casually. "Not dangerous at all." Of course, to someone like her, nothing was dangerous. But for me? Who knew? I didn't think twice. I sheathed my sword and followed her like a loyal pup. Old man Zhang watched us leave with a look of pure mischief on his face. I never realized that the legendary, elegant plum blossom sword immortal could be so devious. We took a carriage to the Chilean mountains north of Yuzhou. Qin Aluo stepped out and pointed toward a distant cliff. "On that precipice grows a blood ginseng king. It's vital for repairing your meridians. If you can fetch it, I can guarantee I'll open one of your energy gates in a very short time." "Really?" I scrambled out of the carriage, my eyes lighting up. The only reason I couldn't cultivate was because my 8 extraordinary meridians were blocked. If I could open just one, I could finally start my journey as a real cultivator. "Go on then," she nodded. "I'm on it." I started sprinting toward the forest. "Wait," Qin Aluo called out. She tossed me my sword. "It's just herb gathering," I said, catching it. "I won't need a sword for that." "Just take it," she insisted. She didn't explain why, and I didn't push it. I turned and disappeared into the trees. Standing at the edge of the forest, Qin Aluo's lips curled into a tiny smile. She tapped her foot against the ground and soared into the air like a celestial being, heading deep into the ridges. Half an hour later, she reached a bandit camp nestled near the cliff. Standing on a high branch, she plucked a single leaf and flicked it forward. The leaf whistled through the air like a bullet. It slammed into a massive wooden support pillar, snapping it instantly. A corner of the camp collapsed with a deafening roar. "What happened?" a scarred, brutal-looking man shouted, charging out of the main tent. "Don't just stand there. Go check it out." Qin Aluo didn't hide. She stepped off the branch, letting the bandits see her silhouette before she drifted away into the woods. "After her. Catch that woman," the leader roared. Meanwhile, at the cliffside, I was completely oblivious. I had finally finished the grueling climb, gasping for air. "Blood ginseng, where is it?" I scanned the area Qin Aluo had described, searching for the treasure. Suddenly, angry shouts erupted from the trees nearby. "There he is!" A dozen bandits charged out of the brush, looking absolutely feral. "Are you kidding me?" My heart nearly stopped. I realized then I'd been played. Old Qin had set me up. No wonder she told me to bring the sword. If I hadn't figured it out by now, I'd be a complete idiot. I didn't wait for them to reach me. I turned tail and bolted. "Old Qin, you absolute jerk." I spent the next hour playing a deadly game of hide-and-seek. The bandits were everywhere, searching the woods with bared blades and murderous intent. I huddled behind a massive boulder, hidden by tall grass, shivering like a cornered animal. "Qin Aluo, I swear." I hissed under my breath. What kind of master does this to their student? A woman's grudge is truly a terrifying thing. I peeked out, tracking the bandits' positions. The sun was starting to set. If I could just wait for nightfall, I could use the darkness to slip away. "You think you can trap me, Old Qin? You're still too young." Just as I started feeling smug, a sharp whistle cut through the air. A bolt of sword energy slammed into the boulder right in front of my face. The explosion was deafening. The noise immediately alerted the 5 nearest bandits. I froze, then realized exactly who had fired that shot. I stood up and screamed at the sky. "Qin Aluo, I'm going to kill you." Then I ran for my life. "Get him!" Hack him to pieces, the bandits yelled, closing in. From a high branch in the distance, Chin Alua watched me flee, a faint smile touching her lips. As the forest grew dark, one bandit finally caught up. He swung his heavy iron blade straight at my head. I rolled frantically, narrowly avoiding the edge, looking like a total mess. Haha, pathetic trash. The bandit laughed and delivered a brutal kick to my chest. I held my sword horizontally to block, but the force sent me tumbling several meters back. Up in the trees, Chin Alua frowned. Had I forgotten everything she taught me? A sword isn't just a shield. She was right to send me here. Without a life-and-death struggle, no amount of practice would matter. I was being beaten to a pulp. I had zero combat experience and could barely fight back. More bandits were closing in, attracted by the noise. Look at those clothes, that soft skin. You must be some rich lord's son. The bandit sneered, walking toward me with his blade dripping. Since you want to die so badly, let me help you. I looked at him from 10 paces away. Rage began to boil in my chest. I was a young man with pride. I wasn't going to just lie down and die. This guy wasn't a cultivator. He was a normal human, just like me. If I couldn't even beat him, what was the point of any of this? 10 paces. 5 paces. 3 paces. He was close. I held my breath, forcing myself to be calm despite the terror. Just as he reached me, I exploded upward from the ground. Draw. Strike. In the blink of an eye, a flash of sword light reflected the last rays of the setting sun. It was like a fleeting shadow. A single strike to the throat. On her branch, Chin Aluo's eyes widened slightly. Not bad. The bandit clutched his neck, blood spraying between his fingers. He tried to speak, but his voice was gone. He collapsed into the dirt. Villains always talk too much. I panted, dropping to my butt. I stared at the body in the pool of red, my heart hammering. So this was what it felt like to kill someone. It wasn't a good feeling. Old 9. Shouts came from the brush. 3 more bandits burst into the clearing, their faces twisting into masks of pure fury when they saw their comrade on the ground. I forced myself to stand up, my muscles screaming in protest. 3 more bandits were charging at me, their faces twisted in rage. I didn't say a word. I didn't try to be a hero. I turned around and ran as fast as my legs could carry me. I knew my limits. I couldn't take on 3 at once. The sun dipped below the horizon, and the forest swallowed the light. Darkness fell quickly, but the bandits weren't giving up. I saw the orange glow of torches flickering through the trees. They were hunting me, determined to finish what their friend started. They were like ghosts that refused to leave. I watched those dancing flames from the shadows, a cold chill settling in my chest. Facing them all at once was suicide, but the night was my ally. They were in the light, exposed and visible. I was in the dark, hidden and waiting. This was the perfect chance to pick them off one by one. I moved through the brush, my body staying low, using the tall grass as cover. I crept toward the bandit closest to me, my movements silent and deliberate. I was right behind him. Slash. I lunged out of the darkness, covering his mouth with one hand and drawing my blade across his throat with the other. He let out a muffled groan, his body trembling for a few seconds before going limp. I let him slide to the ground. That was 2. A wave of nausea hit me, and I felt like I was going to throw up. I forced it down, gritting my teeth as I retreated back into the thickets. This was a world where the strong ate the weak. If I didn't kill them, I was the one who would end up in a shallow grave. I wiped the blood off my hands and focused on my breathing. My eyes locked onto the remaining torches. The fear was still there, but it was being replaced by a cold, sharp focus. I felt like a predator watching its prey. Something inside me was changing. The life-and-death struggle was stripping away my hesitation. High up in the trees, Chin Alua watched me. She saw the transformation in my eyes and seemed satisfied. She turned her gaze toward the bandit camp in the distance. She had her own business to attend to. She had told a small lie about the Blood Ginseng King. When she first entered these mountains, she had seen it growing on a cliffside. Even a legendary sword immortal like her had been surprised by its quality. It was a rare treasure, far beyond any common medicine. She had left it there as a test for me, but when she checked again, it was gone. The bandits must have found it and taken it back to their camp. She hoped I was lucky enough that they hadn't eaten it yet. Finding another one wouldn't be easy. Chin Aluo tapped her foot against the branch and soared through the air. She moved like a phantom, crossing the forest in seconds until she reached the bandit stronghold. Most of the camp was asleep, with only a few guards circling the perimeter. She slipped past them effortlessly. The camp was filled with stolen loot, chests of gold, silver, and jewels piled high. She didn't even glance at them. No matter how much gold these thieves had, it couldn't compare to the wealth of her useless disciple. She ignored the riches and started flipping through the medicine crates instead. She tossed aside common herbs, ginseng, fleeceflower root, spiritual mushrooms. Finally, she opened a delicate wooden box. Inside lay a blood-red ginseng root, pulsing with energy. She let out a small sigh of relief. My luck held out. The bandits hadn't ruined it yet. "Who's there?" a voice roared. A massive man sitting on a tiger-skin rug slammed his eyes open. He grabbed a wine jar and hurled it toward her with lethal force. Chin Aluo didn't panic. She tucked the ginseng away and tilted her body just enough to let the jar whistle past her. "A woman? You've got guts stealing from me," the brute snarled. In the dim light, he couldn't see her face clearly. He lunged forward like a cannonball, his heavy footsteps shaking the ground. "Too loud," Chin Aluo whispered. She frowned and gave a casual flick of her wrist. A terrifying wave of sword energy erupted from her fingers, glowing white in the dark. It slammed into the man's chest, sending him flying 30 feet back. He hit the ground hard, coughing up a mouthful of blood, his face pale with shock. "I'll spare you today," she said coldly. "Someone else will come for your life later." She turned and walked away. The bandit leader was a warrior who had opened one divine treasury. He wasn't strong, but he wasn't weak either. He was the perfect stepping stone for me. She really was putting a lot of thought into my training. Later, Chin Aluo walked back through the moonlit forest. She looked for me, but couldn't find me or the bandits. All she saw were streaks of blood staining the leaves. She followed the trail to the edge of the woods. I was sitting there, my clothes soaked in blood, gasping for air. "Where are they?" she asked. "Dead," I replied, my voice thick with exhaustion. She narrowed her eyes. She had underestimated me. I was more ruthless than I looked. I took a deep breath and looked up at her. "You did this on purpose, didn't you, master?" "Yes," she answered without a hint of guilt. I didn't know what to say to that. Her honesty was frustrating. "How does it feel to kill for the first time?" she asked. "Terrible," I said truthfully. "I feel sick." "You'll get used to it," she said, turning toward the carriage waiting on the road. "Let's go. We're heading back." I stood up and followed her, my legs shaking. As the carriage started to roll, the silence inside was heavy. I looked at her and asked, "If I had been about to die, would you have saved me?" "I don't know," she said calmly. "You can try dying next time and find out." I went quiet. My life was too precious to gamble on a maybe. "Starting today," she continued, "besides practicing your sword, you will come to these mountains every day to hunt bandits. Just a heads up, their leader has opened one divine treasury." "A cultivator?" I jumped. "Master, I don't think I'm ready for that. Maybe we should let the government handle it." "The matter is settled," she said. Then, she tossed a wooden box into my lap. I opened it, and my eyes went wide. The blood ginseng. I was so excited I forgot who I was dealing with. "Master, I love you. Give me a hug." I reached out to embrace her, but the air in the carriage suddenly turned sub-zero. Chin Aluo's eyes flashed with a terrifying chill. Before I could pull back, a massive burst of energy exploded from her body. The carriage shattered into pieces. I was sent flying through the air, landing face first in the mud. The horses kept pulling the remains of the carriage away into the moonlight, leaving me behind. By the time the sun rose over Yuzhou City, I was trudging down the road, soaked in dew and looking like a total wreck. It had taken me all night to walk back. I learned a valuable lesson. Offending a woman is bad, but offending a woman as powerful as Chin Aluo is a nightmare. Back at the Li estate, my father, Li Baiwan, was pacing around like a madman. I hadn't come home all night, but he was too terrified of the woman by the lake to go looking for me. When Chin Aluo had returned alone the night before, she only said one thing: "He won't die." My father was worried sick, but he didn't dare utter a single word of complaint. My father, Li Baiwan, didn't dare ask any questions. He just stood there, watching as I limped toward the house, soaked in dew and looking like a complete wreck. When I finally walked into the main hall, everyone froze. "Son, are you okay?" my father cried out, rushing toward me. "What happened to you? You look like you've been through a war." "Do I look like I'm okay?" I snapped, gesturing to my torn clothes and the mud caked on my skin. "I'm alive. That's about the best I can say right now." I scanned the room, my anger bubbling over. "Where is she? Where's old Chin? Is she back?" "She's in the backyard," my father answered quickly. "I'm going to find her," I growled, turning on my heel. "Son, don't be impulsive." Lee Baiwan grabbed my arm, his face pale with fear. "You can't beat her. Please, just stay here." I froze. A wave of bitterness washed over me. I was the third young master of the Lee family, the richest brat in the world. I was a transmigrator, for heaven's sake. I had the knowledge of another world. I had invented soap and glass. According to every story I'd ever read, I was supposed to be invincible. So why was I stuck with blocked meridians? Why couldn't I practice martial arts like a normal protagonist? It felt like the universe was playing a cruel joke on me. "Son, just talk to her calmly," my father pleaded. "That woman, she's terrifying." "Old Lee, you're pathetic," I said, shaking off his hand and giving him a look of pure disdain. "Scared of a woman? Watch me." I puffed out my chest, squared my shoulders, and marched toward the backyard with my head held high. Lee Baiwan hesitated for a second, then scurried after me. I think he was worried I was actually going to pick a fight with a sword immortal. Out by the lake, Chin Aluo was standing perfectly still. She was staring at the water, her expression as calm and unmoving as the surface of the pond. Nearby, old Zhang was sprawled out in his usual lazy spot, sipping wine and looking like he didn't have a care in the world. When I burst into the yard, old Zhang cracked one eye open. "Ho, the kid's got some spine after all," he chuckled. He looked excited, like he was settling in to watch a good show. I kept walking, my pace steady, my aura projecting total fearlessness. I told myself I wasn't afraid. I was a man. I wouldn't be intimidated. Then, Chin Aluo turned around. Her gaze was flat. No anger, no threats, just a calm, piercing look. But in that moment, it felt more terrifying than a blade at my throat. My knees wobbled. The fearless energy I'd built up vanished instantly. "Master," I chirped, a massive, fake smile plastered on my face. "I'm back. Did you sleep well last night?" Old Zhang looked away, face-palming. I could practically hear him thinking about how much of a disgrace I was. I didn't care. Survival came first. "Go practice your sword," Chin Aluo said coldly. I didn't argue. I grabbed my sword and started training immediately. While I worked up a sweat, old Zhang approached her, his voice low. "Did you really leave him out there alone? You didn't help him at all?" "No," Chin Aluo replied. "He is a natural talent." Old Zhang scoffed. "A talent? The boy can't even open a single energy gate." "He is a talent for killing," she said flatly. "The first time you killed someone, how long did it take you to recover?" Old Zhang frowned. "A full day? It's not a good feeling. I still don't like it." "Last night, he killed over a dozen men," she said. "When I saw him afterward, he was smiling. Could you have done that at his age?" Old Zhang went silent. He finally understood. It wasn't about physical strength, it was about the mind. My willpower and my ruthlessness were far beyond my years. "A heart like that is rare," Chin Aluo whispered, watching me swing my sword. "I want to see what he becomes once those 8 meridians are finally open." "It'll be hard," old Zhang sighed. "Even with all the medicine the Li family has, and that blood ginseng, you might only open 1 or 2. To clear all 8, you'd need more legendary herbs. They don't just grow on trees, even for the rich." "I heard the Imperial Academy in the capital has a 1,000-year lotus," Chin Aluo said calmly. Old Zhang stiffened. "The capital? You'd go there?" "The old man running that academy is no joke. Even you might not get out in one piece if you try to take it by force. He's one of the top 3 strongest people in the world." "I won't use force unless I have to," she replied. As they talked, I continued to train. My movements were sharper today, fueled by the lingering adrenaline of last night's slaughter. Eventually, a servant ran up and whispered that everything was ready. "Li Zai," Chin Aluo called out. "Stop. Follow me." We went to the pharmacy room. A massive wooden tub was already steaming, the water temperature even higher than usual. "Get in," she commanded. I stripped off my outer robe and climbed in. The heat was agonizing, the medicinal oils stinging my skin as they seeped into my pores. Chin Aluo stepped forward. Without a word, she slammed her palm into my chest. I screamed. It was a raw, guttural sound that probably echoed across the entire estate. My body buckled and shook, sweat pouring down my face to mix with the herbal bath. Outside, the servants flinched, too terrified to even look toward the door. Inside, Chin Aluo opened the box containing the blood ginseng. She crushed the legendary root with her bare hands, turning it into a glowing red mist. She began funneling that essence directly into my chest, using her own energy to guide the medicine to my shattered meridians. Beads of sweat formed on her forehead. This was exhausting, even for her. "No matter how much it hurts," she hissed, "you must endure." I gritted my teeth until they felt like they would shatter. The pain was beyond description, like my bones were being ground into powder and my veins were being filled with molten lead. But I stayed in that tub. I didn't back down. This was my only shot at becoming something more than a victim in this world. Old Kai gulped down his wine, one jar after another. He didn't even seem to notice his own hand was shaking. The tension in the air was thick, making every second feel like an eternity. Suddenly, a blood-curdling scream ripped through the pharmacy room. It was a sound of pure agony. Then, a deafening explosion rocked the building. The massive wooden tub shattered into 1,000 pieces. Water and medicinal herbs sprayed everywhere, soaking the walls and the floor. I collapsed onto the ground, gasping for air, my body slick with sweat and trembling with exhaustion. In front of me, Chin Aluo didn't look much better. Her long hair was damp, her elegant robes were ruined, and a thin trail of blood leaked from the corner of her mouth. She looked more disheveled than I had ever seen her. It took a long time for her to steady her chaotic energy. "Rest for half a day," she said, her voice strained and weary. "Then, come practice your sword." She didn't say another word. She hurried out of the room, toward her own quarters to recover. I managed to stumble to my feet and crawled outside toward the lake, where I collapsed onto the grass. "Old Kai, did it work?" I asked weakly. My heart felt heavy. I didn't feel the joy I expected. The price she paid to clear my meridians was too high. I had never seen the cold, untouchable Chin Aluo look so broken. I realized then that I owed her a debt I might never be able to repay. Old Kai took a long pull from his wine jar. "She's something else," he said seriously, "especially toward you." I spent the next few hours lying by the water, unable to move even a finger. By noon, Chin Aluo emerged from her room. She had changed into fresh robes and regained her otherworldly, transcendent aura. "Go practice," she commanded, standing by the lakeshore. "I'm on it," I grunted, forcing myself upright. I grabbed my sword and started going through the motions. Old Kai watched me for a moment before looking at her. "I'm impressed," he admitted. "The kid has a strong will. If it were anyone else, I'm not sure they would have survived." "He's decent," Chin Aluo replied calmly. "But without your help, he wouldn't have opened a single meridian in his entire life." "True," Old Kai grunted. "Even now, his talent is the worst among all cultivators. But at least he can start. 1 meridian out of 8 is open. He can try to establish his divine treasury now. If he succeeds, he's officially on the path of martial arts." He paused, glancing at me. "But his cultivation speed will be agonizingly slow. It might even be laughable. Luckily, the Lee family has money. What he lacks in talent, he can make up for with endless pills and rare herbs. But there's one problem. What technique do you want him to learn?" Chin Aluo stared out at the lake. "The Flying Immortal script," she said. "One sword to rule them all. The Flying Immortal from beyond the heavens." Old Kai stiffened. "The technique of the first sword god from 1,000 years ago? Are you serious? That style is no different from external physical training. It's brutally difficult. In 1,000 years, no one besides the sword god himself has mastered it. We have to try something desperate," Chin Aluo said flatly. "He only has 3 years. Do you really think any standard technique will allow him to catch up to Huolinger?" Old Kai went silent. 3 years was nothing. Huolinger was one of the 4 greatest geniuses of the age. Her talent was terrifying. I only had one meridian open. Realistically, no matter what I practiced, I could never catch up to her. That was the cruel reality. The Flying Immortal script focuses on forms and strikes rather than internal energy, Chin Aluo continued. The fact that he created Taiji proves he has a gift for sword forms. Perhaps if he pushes his technique to the absolute limit, he can find his own path, just like the sword god did. It's hard, old Kai sighed. How many people in 1,000 years have actually forged their own path? Even you and I are still bound by the old ways. His journey is starting in the hardest way possible. I can't imagine how long he can hold on. Persistence is everything, Chin Aluo said. She turned to old Kai. You have a lifetime of legendary skills, but no disciple. Doesn't that bother you? Old Kai laughed softly. I have wine and a sword. That's enough. Just say what you want, Chin Aluo. Don't beat around the bush. Join me, she proposed. We will teach him the Flying Immortal script together. I can't recreate the sword god's moves perfectly on my own. Old Kai smirked, taking another drink. The famous Plum Blossom Sword Immortal is asking for a favor. Why should I help you? Or help this kid? We are both sword cultivators, she said, her expression grave. Don't you want to see if someone in this era can recreate the glory of the first sword god? Or maybe even surpass him? Old Kai's eyes flickered. You have big ambitions. Honestly, I don't think he can do it. But, he smiled thinly. I'm interested. The two of us teaching him, backed by the Li family's infinite wealth and the sword god's ultimate technique. Even if he were a pig, he should be able to learn something. He finished his wine in one gulp, a rare spark of excitement in his eyes. He had seen plenty of geniuses, but a trash talent like me was a new challenge. The two strongest sword immortals in the world, the best technique, and endless resources. We were going to spit in the face of fate. Chin Aluo looked over at me, a trace of interest finally appearing in her beautiful eyes. Li Zai, she called out. Come here. I trotted over immediately. They looked at each other and nodded. The deal was struck. Li Zai, Chin Aluo said calmly. Have you heard of the Flying Immortal script? I have, I said, nodding vigorously. It's the #1 technique in the world. They say it's impossible to learn. Only the first sword god ever mastered it. Do you know why? She asked. No idea, I admitted. Because the script has very few instructions on how to cultivate internal energy, she explained. What is there is mediocre at best. Your progress will be incredibly slow. The rest of the script is entirely about sword forms. They are brilliant, but martial arts requires energy as a foundation. Without a strong cultivation base, the moves have no power. Can't I just learn a different energy technique first? I asked. Then use that power to fuel the Flying Immortal moves? No, she said firmly. Many have tried. It doesn't work. Some people obsessed over it so much they lost their minds. If you want to learn this, you have to do it the hard way. I started to worry. If I practiced this Flying Immortal script, would I end up like all those other failures, stuck with a snail's pace of progress? I voiced my concerns to Chin Aluo. Old Kai let out a mocking laugh before she could answer. Kid, you're going to be slow no matter what you practice. You're a top-tier talent in the trash category. There's really no room for your potential to drop any lower. I glared at the old drunk. I really wanted to stab him. Chin Aluo didn't disagree. She thought for a moment, then offered a small consolation. The Li family has money. We can pile up rare herbs and spirit medicines to force your progress. With old Kai and me guiding you, maybe, just maybe, you'll have a sliver of hope. I stayed silent, feeling thoroughly insulted. Then something clicked. I looked at the messy old man by the lake. Old Kai, you're going to teach me too? What? You got a problem with that? Old Kai smirked. Count your blessings, brat. Countless geniuses have begged me to teach them, and I didn't give them the time of day. Now, Chin Aluo and I are teaming up to train you. You better show some results. If you don't, we're both going to lose face. I'll try my best, I said with an awkward smile. Having bad talent wasn't my fault. I wanted to be like those legendary prodigies who broke through levels in a single day, but reality was a cruel mistress. First, memorize the mental cultivation method for the Flying Immortal script. Practice it every morning and evening, Chin Aluo said, tossing a sheepskin scroll at me. As for the sword forms, we will teach you those personally. I caught the scroll and began reading. I focused, burning the words into my mind. After about 10 breaths of time, I looked up. I've got it. It's memorized. That fast? Old Kai asked, sounding skeptical. That was barely enough time to read it once. I have a good memory. Born with it. I grinned, showing off my white teeth. At least I had one thing going for me. Watch closely, Chin Aluo said calmly. She stepped past me. Before I could even blink, the Azure Frost sword was gone from my hand. She didn't say another word as she walked toward the center of the yard. Then, the world changed. In the backyard of the Lee estate, a goddess began to dance with her blade. Flowers and leaves erupted into the air. The Azure Frost sword became a blur of cold light that seemed to block out the sun. Sword energy surged, stretching out hundreds of feet. I stood by the lake, completely stunned. One sword to freeze the world, one strike to intoxicate 1,000 guests. This was a sword immortal. Kid, keep your eyes open, Old Kai shouted. He joined her. Two swords moved like wind and thunder. Their movements were like falling stars, recreating the legendary style of the first sword god from 1,000 years ago. It was a sight I would never forget as long as I lived. Half an hour later, the wind died down. The leaves settled. The light vanished. Everything returned to silence. Chin Aluo left without a word, and Old Kai went back to his wine. They left me there, frozen in shock. When I finally found my voice, it was raspy. Old Kai, how long will it take me to reach that level? 30 years, Old Kai said, taking a sip of wine. What about catching up to the first sword god? I asked. 300 years, he replied flatly. By sunset, the stars were out. I finished my basic practice and slipped out of the Lee estate. I had business to attend to. Back in the yard, Old Kai watched the lake. You're not going after him? Aren't you afraid those bandits will butcher the boy? If he can't handle a few bandits, there's no point in him learning the sword, Chin Aluo replied from the shadows. The leader of those bandits is a real martial artist, Old Kai reminded her. He's opened his first divine treasury. The kid isn't ready for that. It doesn't matter, she said. I didn't tell him to fight them head on. If his luck is bad and he runs into the leader, he can run. The mountain terrain is complex. There's always a way to survive. You're a cold-hearted master, Old Kai muttered, returning to his bottle. If she didn't care, he didn't either. Life or death, it was all up to the kid's luck now. Up in the Chilean mountains, the moon was high. The forest should have been quiet, but it was chaos. I was sprinting through the trees for my life. Behind me, 20 bandits were screaming, chasing me like a pack of wolves. My luck was absolute garbage. I had only planned to find a few lone patrollers to practice my moves on. Instead, I accidentally alerted the big boss. To make things worse, since Chin Aluo had stolen their precious blood god medicine, these bandits were on a hair trigger. The moment they saw me, they went insane. Search everywhere. The bandit leader roared into the empty woods. Dig up the ground if you have to. Find that brat. I was crouched in a thicket of tall grass, watching the torches flicker in the dark. My head was throbbing. How was I supposed to fight this? It was 20 against 1, and the leader was a divine treasury user. I gripped my sword. I had to move. I started backing away slowly, staying in the shadows. I couldn't beat that grandson of a bitch yet. I'd hide for now, and once I opened my own divine treasury, I'd come back for his head. I backed up about 100 yards until I saw 2 bandits separated from the group. I didn't hesitate. I lunged. The Azure Frost sword cleared its scabbard with a hiss. A flash of cold light sliced through the dark. Before the 2 men could even react, blood sprayed from their throats. Over there, the leader shouted, hearing the scuffle. Get him. Catch me if you can, grandson. I yelled back. I flipped him the middle finger from 100 yards away, turned on my heels, and bolted. An hour later, I burst out of the forest, looking like a total wreck. I jumped onto my horse and rode hard for the city. The sun was just beginning to peek over the horizon when I reached the gates of Yuzhou. I galloped back to the Lee estate. The servants didn't even look surprised to see me covered in dirt and blood again. A few pretty maids even gave me sympathetic, shy looks. When I have time, ladies, we'll discuss the meaning of life. I joked with a tired grin before rushing to the backyard. Old Kai hadn't claimed his spot by the lake yet, and Chin Aluo was still in her room. I grabbed the best spot, sat down cross-legged, and began circulating the flying immortal script. Chin Aluo said dawn and dusk were the best times. Since my talent sucked, I had to work twice as hard. It felt unfair. Wasn't I supposed to be the main character? Where were my flashy titles? Why did the four great geniuses get all the glory while I was stuck running from bandits? I closed my eyes, gritting my teeth as I forced the energy to move through my body. Nearby, a door creaked open. Chin Aluo stepped out and saw me practicing. A small sense of pride touched her heart. At least I was diligent. Hard work could make up for a lack of talent. But then, her body stiffened. Her eyes widened in pure shock. Something was wrong. In the room next door, Old Kai also. Old Kai pushed the door open with a bang, his eyes wide with shock as he stared at my figure by the lake. He turned to Chin Aluo, his voice low and urgent. Didn't you tell him? You have to be calm and focused when you practice. You can't carry any emotions into it. Chin Aluo's face darkened. I thought he knew. That's common sense for any martial artist. I didn't think I needed to say it. We're in trouble, Old Kai said, his knuckles cracking as he paced. I just hope the kid is lucky enough not to lose his mind or explode from a cultivation backlash. By the lake, I was still circulating the flying immortal script, my heart burning with indignation. I had no idea that behind me, two legendary sword immortals were pacing back and forth, sweating with anxiety. They were terrified I was about to ruin myself on my very first day. If word got out that two masters taught a disciple for 10 days only to turn him into an idiot, they'd be the laughingstock of the continent for the next 1,000 years. Half an hour passed. Old Kai frowned, watching me sit there like a statue. Something's wrong. There's no movement at all. Usually, if your heart is this restless during practice, you'd at least spit out a mouthful of blood to show for it. It's too quiet. Should I wake him up? No, Chin Aluo said, her expression grave. Forcing him awake now could make things worse. We wait. We waited. In the east, the sun began to peek over the horizon, its first rays cutting through the morning chill. Suddenly, the air around me shifted. Waves erupted on the lake's surface without a single gust of wind. Old Kai and Chin Aluo froze. A dull roar echoed from my chest, sounding like 1,000 claps of thunder. The surrounding spiritual energy began to swirl, rushing toward me in a violent torrent and pouring directly into my divine treasury. The two masters were stunned. This made no sense. Didn't this kid just open his first meridian? Old Kai stammered, his jaw dropping. What the hell is happening? I don't know, Chin Aluo whispered, her calm facade finally cracking. Maybe we were all wrong. Maybe everyone for the last 1,000 years has been wrong. Old Kai looked at her. You mean, the flying immortal script is different from every other technique? Everyone else tried to be calm, and they failed. But this kid stumbled into the right way by being angry? It's the only explanation, Chin Aluo said. Otherwise, with his mediocre talent, there's no way he could open his first divine treasury this quickly. We'll ask him when he wakes up. Old Kai shook his head, looking at me with a mix of envy and disbelief. This kid's luck is unbelievable. As they spoke, the light from my chest grew blinding. The roaring inside me sounded like a miniature world being born. Thunder crashing, oceans churning. Another half-hour passed before I finally snapped my eyes open. My vision felt like lightning, sharp and piercing. A surge of powerful energy exploded from my chest, rippling outward and sending sand and water flying in every direction. Is this what it feels like to be a martial artist? I looked at my hands, my heart racing with excitement. I felt like I could take on 3 girls like Hualinger at once. Hey kid, stop daydreaming. You're drooling, Old Kai barked. I snapped out of it and wiped my mouth with a grin. Sorry, I just opened the treasury. I got a bit excited. Chin Aluo walked over, her eyes searching mine. How did you do it? Do what? I asked, confused. By my calculations, even with our help and all the resources of the Lee estate, it should have taken you at least 10 days, she said. Tell me, what were you thinking about while you practiced? I rubbed my nose, feeling a bit embarrassed. I was thinking, why does a great guy like me have no talent? Why do all those holy sons and chosen ones get to look so cool while I don't? I was pretty pissed off, actually. Chin Aluo and Old Kai exchanged a look and nodded. That was it. The flying immortal script thrived on intense emotion. Being calm actually slowed it down. The rush of blood from my anger must have acted like a turbocharger for the energy. Unbelievable, Old Kai muttered, looking like he'd swallowed a fly. I've practiced martial arts my whole life, and I'm getting schooled by a brat. I didn't care about their technical talk. All I heard was that I was a genius. In my head, I was already imagining myself beating up my rivals. Feeling invincible, I looked at the two masters. Hey, how about a spar? Old Kai blinked. Is he crazy? Go ahead, sword freak, Chin Aluo said calmly. Just don't cripple him. I'll try, Old Kai said with a wicked grin. He flicked his wrist, and an ancient sword flew out from the house. It didn't even leave its scabbard, but the sheer pressure made the lake water rise 30 feet into the air. Holy crap, I yelped. I turned to run, but it was too late. Boom. A massive shockwave hit me. When the water finally settled, there was a human-shaped hole in the back wall of the courtyard. I was wedged inside it, covered in dust, and looking like a total wreck. That night, still smarting from the lesson, I headed back to Mount Chelan. I was frustrated and needed someone to hit. The bandits were the perfect targets. With my new energy flowing through my meridian, I felt faster and stronger than ever. Chief, he's running west, a bandit shouted. Then move. Catch him, the leader roared. I led them on a wild goose chase through the forest for 2 hours, circling half the mountain. The bandits were panting, their tongues hanging out. Chief, what is this kid doing? Isn't he tired? A skinny bandit wheezed. I don't care. I'm going to skin him alive, the leader yelled, pushing forward. But while they were chasing my shadow in the deep woods, I doubled back. I slipped through the trees and arrived right back at their main camp. Only about a dozen men were left to guard the place. They jumped when they saw me. Tables have turned, boys, I said, flashing a nasty grin. Drop your weapons. You're surrounded, I yelled, stepping into the center of the bandit camp. Surrender now, and I might let you live. The bandits froze, looking around frantically. One of them squinted, realizing I was standing there all by myself. He let out a relieved laugh. He's alone. Kill him. The rest of them found their courage and drew their machetes, charging at me with a roar. I just grinned. Have it your way. I tried to be nice. I gripped the hilt of green frost and lunged forward. These bandits were ruthless, sure, but only against helpless villagers. To them, I was a monster. I moved like a madman under the moonlight, my blade blurring as I hacked through them. Each swing felt natural, fueled by the energy flowing from my newly opened divine treasury. Their crude iron blades were no match for the legendary sword of the Plum Blossom Immortal. In minutes, a dozen men lay groaning on the ground. I stood in the middle of the carnage and laughed like a villain. Bunch of weaklings. Chief, he's at the camp, a voice screamed from the ridge above. The bandit leader, who had been chasing my shadow in the woods, looked down and realized he'd been played. It's a trap. Get back there now. I didn't waste time. I kicked in the door to the main cabin and started tossing the place. I found piles of gold and silver, but I just tossed them aside. Trash. All of it. Don't these guys have anything actually valuable? My eyes landed on the leader's chair, a massive seat draped in tiger skin. I felt around the base, but found nothing. Frustrated, I raised green frost and chopped the whole thing in half. Boom. The chair split, revealing a hidden compartment. Inside sat a small, polished rosewood box. My heart skipped a beat. I knew it. Kid, put that down, the bandit leader roared, bursting through the door with his men right behind him. His face was pale with rage the moment he saw the box in my hand. You want it? Come and get it. I taunted. I tucked the box under my arm, smashed through the back window, and sprinted into the dark forest. Get him. If we lose that box, you're all dead, the leader screamed. I ran until my lungs burned. The forest was a blur of branches and shadows. I could hear the bandits behind me, their numbers thinning as they struggled to keep up. After an hour, only the leader was still on my tail. He was obsessed. Whatever was in this box, it was worth more than his life. Eventually, we both collapsed near a clearing, gasping for air. We were both completely spent. The leader leaned against a tree, his chest heaving. Kid, give me the box, and I'll let you live. We're even. In your dreams, I wheezed, clutching the box tighter. If you want it, come take it. I'll give you everything in the camp, he pleaded, his anger turning into desperation. The gold, the jewels, it's all yours. I forced myself upright, leaning on my sword. I've got plenty of money. What I want is this. I turned and started jogging again, forcing my leaden legs to move. I'm going to skin you alive, he howled, stumbling after me. As the first light of dawn touched the sky, I reached the edge of the forest. I turned back to check the distance, but the trail was empty. Had I finally lost him? Suddenly, a shadow lunged from the brush. A fist, backed by the power of a mid-stage divine treasury, whistled through the air. The force was so great it made the air crackle. I had no time to dodge. I pulled green frost across my chest to block. Crack! The impact sent me flying. I smashed into a massive oak tree, the world spinning. I felt a sharp, stabbing pain in my chest, and a mouthful of blood sprayed onto the grass. I told you to give it back, the leader spat, walking toward me with murder in his eyes. I gritted my teeth, counting his steps. 3, 2, 1. I exploded upward, thrusting my sword with every bit of strength I had left. He didn't expect me to have any fight left in me. The blade sank deep into his chest. He gasped, coughing up blood as he stumbled back. I didn't wait to see if he died. I pulled my sword out and ran for the road, my vision blurring. I managed to find my horse and haul myself into the saddle. By the time I reached the gates of Yujo City, I was slumped over the horse's neck, barely conscious. Is that the third young master of the Lee family? A guard shouted, running over to grab the reins. He's covered in blood. Get him home now. The Lee estate went into a total panic the moment I was carried through the gates. My father, Lee Baiwan, came running, his face white with fear. Immortal, please look at him. Chin Aluo checked my pulse, her expression cold as ever. A few broken ribs. He'll live. Take him to the pharmacy. Old Kai watched from the lake, taking a long pull from his flask. Kid went head-to-head with a mid-stage fighter and survived. Not bad, but he's still too weak. If he wants to stand a chance against the geniuses of the world, he needs more than just luck. They dropped me into a vat of boiling medicinal herbs. Through the thick mist of the pharmacy, I felt Chin Aluo's fingers press against my pressure points, sending jolts of raw energy through my body. I let out a muffled groan of agony before the darkness finally took me. My body began to tremble as the medicinal power and the sharp stings of the acupuncture needles surged through me. I could feel the wound on my chest knitting back together. It was happening right before my eyes, a recovery so fast it was terrifying. After more than an hour, Chin Aluo stepped out of the pharmacy. She looked exhausted, her usual cold composure replaced by a deep weariness. How is he? Old Kai asked, leaning against the doorframe. He's out of danger, Chin Aluo replied, her voice heavy. The kid is lucky to be alive. Old Kai let out a long breath of relief. What did he do to piss that bandit leader off so much? That palm strike to the chest was meant to kill. The man was clearly driven mad with rage. Maybe it was because of this, Chin Aluo said. She tossed a small red wooden box toward him. Old Kai caught it, looking confused. But the moment he flipped the lid open, his expression froze. Inside the box lay a pitch-black stone. It looked ordinary, like something you'd find in a riverbed, but Old Kai stared at it, as if he were looking at a ghost. What is it? Chin Aluo asked. She had looked at the stone earlier and found nothing special about it. Old Kai regained his senses and flashed a grin. Chin Aluo, your cultivation might be higher than mine, but when it comes to worldliness, you're still just a little girl. Do you even know what this is? No, she admitted, shaking her head. This is Scarlet Fire Divine Iron, Old Kai said. He channeled a sliver of energy into the stone. Suddenly, the black surface cracked, and a wave of scorching heat surged through the room. Chin Aluo's eyes narrowed. This iron is a divine object of pure yang, Old Kai explained. They say it comes from the stars. When a star falls to Earth, it simmers in the planet's core for 10,000 years to form this. In some ways, it's more precious than the 1,000-year-cold iron used to forge your green frost sword. Chin Aluo leaned in. In some ways? What do you mean? I mean it's beautiful but useless, Old Kai said with a dry laugh. If you're thinking of using this to forge a unique sword for the kid, forget it. This stuff was born in the heart of the Earth's fire. There isn't a flame in this world hot enough to melt it. It's a treasure you can look at, but you can't use. Yahello frowned. There has to be a way. Old Kai thought for a moment. There is, but it's nearly impossible. I read in an ancient text that extreme yang cannot exist without yin. To melt this, you'd need a material of equal and opposite power, something of extreme yin. Only that could balance the iron and let it take shape. So we need a legendary cold treasure, Yahello whispered. Exactly, Old Kai said. And finding something on the level of Scarlet Fire Divine Iron won't be easy. But think about it. How did a group of low-level bandits in the Chilean Mountains get their hands on something like this? Even you didn't recognize it, yet that bandit leader knew its value well enough to hide it so carefully. It's strange. Old Kai was right. Most people would have thrown that stone away. Someone must have told the bandit leader what it was, or he wasn't who he claimed to be. If we want to find the Een treasure, we might have to start with that bandit leader, Yahello suggested. Old Kai chuckled. You going to handle it personally? I don't do chores for my disciples, she said calmly. Zai found the iron. He can find the rest. The bandit leader isn't beyond his reach. If he works hard, he can catch up. Inside the pharmacy, I finally opened my eyes. The moment I tried to sit up, a wave of agony washed over me. My chest felt like it was being crushed by a mountain. I laid there, shaking, breathing through the pain for a long time before I managed to crawl out of the medicinal vat. It took me nearly half an hour just to reach the lake. I was limping, teeth grit, dragging my body forward one step at a time. Still alive? Not bad, Old Kai said, glancing at me. I thought I'd have to dig a hole for you. Shut up, I wheezed, sitting down by the water with a groan. I'm not dying that easily. But it was close. Too close. Real martial artists aren't as simple as you thought, are they? Old Kai asked. He was strong, I admitted. If he hadn't been careless, I wouldn't have made it back. I told them everything that happened that night. They listened in silence, their eyes meeting once or twice in surprise. You did the right thing, Old Kai said, his voice uncharacteristically serious. Even after you stabbed him, staying to fight would have been suicide. You didn't let a small victory go to your head. Good. I just knew I couldn't win, I said, leaning back. You will soon, Yahello said. For the next few days, focus on your internal breathing. Once your ribs heal, I will teach you the flying immortal sword technique. All of it. My heart leaped. Thank you, master. I got a little too excited and accidentally jerked my chest, sending a fresh jolt of pain through my body that made me hiss through my teeth. While I was starting my true path into the world of martial arts, a carriage was rumbling toward the capital of Great Shang. After days of travel, my sister, Li Yue, and the third prince, Mu Yao, had finally arrived. The capital was a fortress of history, a city that had stood for 1,000 years. Even the most arrogant sword immortals had to lower their heads when entering its gates. It was the heart of the empire's power. Li Yue pulled back the carriage curtain, staring at the massive walls with a grim expression. For years, the Li family had tried to stay away from the politics of the imperial city. But the time for hiding was over. The collision was inevitable now. In the carriage ahead, Mu Yao watched the gates with a smirk. He had succeeded. He had brought the Li family into the lion's den, exactly where the emperor wanted them. Mu Yao didn't have many options left. In Yuzhou City, my family were the absolute overlords, but the capital was a different game. My sister, Li Yue, had already arrived, and he knew I wouldn't be far behind. He gave the order, and the carriage rolled forward. As they entered the gates of the Great Shang capital, secret reports began flying into every major manor in the city. The word was out. The Li family had finally arrived. Inside the imperial palace, the 9th princess, Mu Rong, listened to a young eunuch's report. She was a beauty, her smile as delicate as a flower. She had heard her brothers, and even her father, the emperor, mention the Li family for years. They were becoming too powerful to ignore, yet they had always stayed away from the capital. She was curious. The 4th prince is here, the eunuch announced. A man in white stepped into the room. This was Mu Bai. He was cold, his face expressionless, and his steps were so precise they looked measured by a ruler. He was one of the 4 greatest geniuses in the world, standing on the same level as the divine son of the temple and the Buddha's own successor. Just his presence felt like a weight in the room. Murong, Mubai said calmly. Your third brother is back. Aren't you going to see him? Talking to Mu Yao is too exhausting. She replied with a small laugh. I'd rather stay here. I heard the Li family came with him. Is it the heir? Mubai's eyes sharpened. He had heard I had become the disciple of the Plum Blossom Sword Immortal. He wanted to test my skills. But Murong shook her head, telling him that only my older sister, Li Yue, had come. I was nowhere to be found. Mubai frowned, disappointed, but Murong just smiled. She knew the game. If the eldest daughter was here, the heir would follow. She told him to be patient. The storm was coming. While they were plotting in the palace, I was suffering. It had been 5 days since that bandit leader beat me within an inch of my life. I spent every waking moment either soaking in medicinal baths or trying to circulate the energy of the non-immortal technique. It was brutal. Even with Qin Aluo's guidance and a mountain of resources, my progress was slow. It wasn't just slow, it was pathetic. Qin Aluo looked like she wanted to quit being my master every single day. If I wasn't so good at begging, and if the whole world didn't already know she'd taken me in, she would have vanished long ago. I told you, old Kai said, sounding way too happy about my struggle. It was expected. This isn't working. Qin Aluo snapped, her temper rising. At this rate, he won't catch up to the world's geniuses in 100 years. We need to force his meridians open. Old Kai sighed. He pointed out that my body was already becoming resistant to the expensive herbs. I was a human money pit. The amount of wealth the Li family had poured into me in just a few weeks could have bought an entire city. We were hitting a wall. I'll go to the capital, Qin Aluo said, her voice turning cold. The Imperial Academy has a medicine king herb. If I can get that for Zai, we can break through his second gate. Old Kai warned her. The head of the academy, the Confucian master, was a monster. He was undefeated within the city walls. Even a sword immortal like her might not come back. They needed a trade, something to move a man who already had everything. Everyone has a price, Qin Aluo muttered. I just need to find his. She looked around the yard. Where is that boy anyway? He went to the Chilean mountains, old Kai said. Should be back by now. Right on cue. I came stumbling into the back garden. I didn't walk in. I basically collapsed. My clothes were shredded, my skin was bruised, and my hair looked like a bird had built a nest in it. I looked like I'd been dragged through a thorn bush and then kicked down a hill. Nice look, kid, old Kai mocked. Did you try to kidnap someone's daughter and get caught? Shut up, old Zhang. I barked, leaning against a pillar for support. I looked at Qin Aluo, my voice full of indignation. Master, those damn bandits ambushed me. I barely made it out. She didn't even blink. You go to their camps to pick fights every 3 days. I'd ambush you too. Are you dead? No? Then stop complaining. I ran a hand through my messy hair, feeling completely unloved. My life was a tragedy. Your ribs seem healed enough, Qin Aluo said, stepping into the center of the yard. She held out her hand. Give me your sword. I perked up instantly, forgetting the pain. I handed her the blue frost sword. She took the blade and moved. In an instant, she wasn't a person anymore. She was a streak of crimson light. The air in the courtyard began to howl. She swung, and the world seemed to split. A massive boom echoed through the estate as a shockwave of sword intent tore across the ground. The heavy stone tiles of the courtyard snapped in half like they were made of paper. She looked back at me, the sword humming in her hand. The real training was finally beginning. Peerless sharpness. Unstoppable force. With one final strike, Qin Aluo finished her demonstration. She sheathed the momentum and walked back toward me. She tossed the blue frost sword through the air, and I caught it with trembling hands. Follow the footprints on the ground, she said, her voice cool and indifferent. Practice until your steps match them perfectly. Only then will I teach you the next move. I looked down at the courtyard floor and froze. When did those footprints get there? During her performance. She had been so fast that I hadn't seen anything but that final flash of crimson light. If not for the deep indentations in the stone, I would have sworn she was flying the entire time. If she could do it, so could I. I stepped toward the nearest footprint and tried to mimic her stance. I pushed off, aiming for the second mark. I didn't even make it halfway. My body spun out of control, and I went flying through the air. My head slammed into a nearby tree with a sickening thud. Old Kai sat by the lake, sipping his wine. He let out a soft chuckle. If the flying immortal technique were that easy to learn, it wouldn't have gone unmastered for 1,000 years. Those steps alone are enough to give you a permanent headache, kid. Before his words even finished, a gust of wind rushed past him. I had tried again, only to overshoot the mark entirely. I soared over the grass and crashed headfirst into the lake with a massive splash. Oh, what's wrong? Old Kai mocked, brushing a few stray droplets of water off his sleeve. Decided to give up and drown yourself instead? I scrambled out of the water, soaking wet and shivering. Old Zhang, stop talking trash. Why is this so hard? Can't you give me a hand here? The footwork and sword style of the flying immortal technique are unique, he said, his smile fading into something more serious. Especially when you use your inner energy. If you don't master the rhythm, the power backfires. You'll just keep hurting yourself. He shrugged. As for helping, I'm afraid I'm useless there. You're on your own, kid. Good luck. Some friend you are, I grumbled. I wiped the water from my eyes and stood back up. The rest of the afternoon was a symphony of failure. The servants in the Lee estate walked on eggshells, terrified they'd get flattened by their young master as I went hurtling across the yard. I crashed into walls. I slammed into trees. I fell into the lake so many times I lost count. By sunset, I hadn't managed to progress past the third step. There were 9 in total. I'm heading in, Old Kai said, patting the dust off his robes as darkness fell. Try not to kill yourself before breakfast. He disappeared into the house, leaving me alone in the moonlit courtyard. I kept going. I fell, I bled, and I got back up. Again and again. Inside the house, Chin Aluo stood by her window, watching me. A flicker of approval crossed her beautiful, cold eyes. Most people would have quit hours ago. In fact, most people wouldn't have survived the first step of my training, shattering and rebuilding my meridians every single day. That kind of pain broke men. She stayed because of my persistence. Geniuses were common, but people with true, unbreakable willpower were rare. The path of cultivation was a marathon. She had seen countless prodigies start strong only to fade into obscurity because they lacked grit. But me? I was different. I was starting behind everyone else. But if I could bridge that gap with sheer determination, I would eventually shock the world. The night grew long. The estate went quiet. I was exhausted, my muscles screaming for rest, but I refused to stop. I didn't want to lose to anyone. Not to Mu Yao, and certainly not to the low expectations of 2 sword immortals. I tripped and tumbled into the lake for the 100th time. I crawled back onto the grass, gasping for air, staring up at the stars. Sword immortal, I whispered. It sounded so cool. I wanted that title. The path was there. It was difficult, sure, but it was better than having no path at all. I forced myself to my feet and stepped back onto the first footprint. When the sun rose and the roosters began to crow, the courtyard was empty. I had already finished my internal energy cultivation and left for the Chilean mountains to continue my training in private. Chin Aluo walked into the yard and looked at the ground. Amidst thousands of messy, overlapping tracks, one set of prints stood out. I had reached the 5th step. She remained silent, but a thought crossed her mind. Hard work really could make up for a lack of talent. At this rate, I would master the first move soon. Meanwhile, the capital city of Great Shang was buzzing. My older sister, Li Yue, had finally arrived. The Li family of Yuzhou was a legend. In just 10 years, they had risen from a common merchant house to a family so wealthy they could rival the national treasury. The imperial court couldn't ignore them anymore. Every faction in the city was watching her, especially the supporters of the 4 princes locked in the struggle for the throne. First Prince Mu Yuan, 3rd Prince Mu Yao, 4th Prince Mu Bai, and 11th Prince Mu Qing. The 4 kings had been fighting a bitter shadow war for years. But the first person to call for my sister wasn't a prince. It was the most brilliant pearl of the great Shang dynasty, Princess Mu Rong. She was the most beautiful woman in the empire, a woman so stunning that even the harshest historians couldn't help but praise her in the official records. At the Wanxiang restaurant, the 2 women sat by a window overlooking the bustling capital. Their beauty was so radiant that people on the street couldn't help but stare. "Sisterly, please," Murong said, raising her teacup with a smile. Thank you, Princess, Li Yue replied, taking a polite sip. I heard you traveled here with my brother, the third prince, Murong said softly. Did you run into any trouble on the road? Li Yue shook her head. No. Thanks to His Highness's protection, the journey was quite smooth. That's good to hear, Murong smiled. I've admired your reputation for a long time. When I heard you were coming to the capital, I couldn't wait to meet you. I hope you don't mind my sudden invitation. You are too kind, Princess. It is my honor to be here, my sister replied smoothly. Murong laughed softly. Let's drop the formalities, shall we? Tell me, what are your plans for the city? Why not stay at my manor for a few days? I haven't lived there in a while, and if you come, I'll have a perfect excuse to ask my mother for permission to stay outside the palace. I appreciate the offer, Li Yue said, her expression calm and professional. But I am here on business to discuss several partnerships. My schedule and lodging are already arranged. I'm afraid I must decline. Oh, that's a shame, Murong said, looking genuinely disappointed for a moment before brightening up. Well, no matter. You're in the capital now. We'll have plenty of chances to see each other. Li Yue nodded, waiting for the real point of the meeting. Regarding those partnerships you mentioned, Murong continued, leaning in slightly. Do you have anyone in mind yet? I know several reputable families I could introduce you to. My sister, Li Yue, sipped her tea calmly. She mentioned that the third prince had already recommended 3 potential partners to the Li family, the Zhongsun Alliance and the Yin family bank. He'd promised to introduce us, but we hadn't met them yet. When Murong heard those names, a strange light flickered in her beautiful eyes. She whispered them under her breath. I could tell she was thinking that her brother was quite the strategist. Those 2 organizations were tied to the imperial court, but they were also deeply connected to the third prince himself. By recommending them, he was clearly trying to expand his own influence under the guise of helping us. He had completed the emperor's task, but he was definitely hiding his own selfish motives. Murong started to say something, then hesitated and swallowed her words. My sister noticed and played along perfectly. She asked the princess for advice, claiming she was new to the capital and needed guidance. Murong looked sincere. She warned my sister that the capital was a messy web of power. Even though everyone claimed to serve the court, many people had their own hidden agendas. She told my sister to be very careful about who she chose to work with. Could you be more specific, princess? My sister asked, her voice dropping to a serious tone. Murong glanced around the busy second floor of the restaurant. Walls have ears, she said softly. I can't say too much. Just be cautious. But if you trust me, consider the Zhongsun family. That's my mother's clan. I can actually speak for you there. My sister nodded, soaking in the warning. The business talk ended there. Murong shifted the conversation to Yuzhou City, acting like a curious girl who had never left the palace. She wanted to lower my sister's guard. It worked. As the talk turned to gossip, my sister relaxed. Murong asked about the Li estate, calling it a legend in the capital because of our strange inventions. She asked if it was true that I, the third son, had invented things like perfume, glass, and soap. My sister laughed it off. She told the princess that an old traveler had taught us those things during his overseas voyages. She claimed I was only 17 and couldn't possibly have come up with them. Murong nodded, but I doubt she fully believed it. Legends usually have a grain of truth, and the imperial family was definitely keeping an eye on me. My sister smiled to herself. She knew exactly what the princess was up to, but she didn't mind. She needed to see how the royals would react to us. As she looked at Murong, she couldn't help but notice how stunning the princess was. She really was the most beautiful woman in Great Shang. My sister actually started thinking that Murong would make a great wife for me. The way my sister stared at her made Murong shiver. She felt a strange chill, unaware she was being scouted as a potential bride. Meanwhile, back at Mount Chilian, I wasn't thinking about marriage. I felt a sudden shiver down my spine. I spun around, thinking the bandits had caught up to me, but the woods were empty. I breathed a sigh of relief. Those guys were getting slower. Further down the mountain path, a dozen bandits were collapsed on the ground, gasping for air. Their leader looked furious. He couldn't understand how I had become so fast. He suspected I had finally opened a divine treasury and become a true martial artist. He warned his men not to face me alone. Hey, Are you guys still coming or what? I had doubled back and was standing on a high rock, shouting down at them. The bandit leader's face turned bright red with rage. He threatened to skin me alive. I've heard that one 1,000 times. I yelled back, hands on my hips like a street brawler. Are you chasing me or am I leaving? The leader roared and ordered his men to move. I laughed and took off again. I wasn't stupid enough to fight a whole crowd, but if one or two fell behind, I was ready for them. As the sun began to set, the crowd thinned out. Eventually, it was just me and the bandit leader left running. We reached the exit of the forest, and the leader bent over, clutching his knees and panting. He challenged me to a fair fight. I stopped and turned around. Fine, but if I win, you answer 3 questions. He agreed, desperate to get his hands on me. Before I could even finish my sentence, he lunged. But I was ready. I moved with a grace I'd never felt before, the flying immortal technique. Even though I'd only learned the basics, my movements were ethereal, like a spirit drifting through the trees. He swung and missed. He stomped the ground, lunging again. I didn't panic. I stepped back, kicked off a tree trunk, and flipped through the air. My sword, Light Frost, cleared its sheath with a sharp hiss. It was a single, precise strike aimed straight for his heart. The leader's instinct screamed. He threw himself into a desperate roll, but he wasn't fast enough. The blade tore through his clothes and sliced deep into his chest. Blood sprayed across his shirt. He tried to scramble up, but his vision blurred. Before he could move, the cold tip of my sword was resting against his throat. You lost, I said calmly. He stared up at me, his face pale with shock. This is impossible. The bandit leader stared at the cold steel pressed against his throat. He looked completely stunned. I grinned at him. I asked if he was going to be a sore loser or if I needed to poke a few more holes in him before he gave up. He growled, his face darkening, and finally admitted defeat. He told me to ask what I wanted to know. My smile grew wider. I wanted to know where he got that piece of red fire iron essence. The sun was dipping below the horizon, casting long, orange shadows across the forest floor. When the leader heard my question, he flinched. He couldn't believe I recognized the stone. He asked how I knew what it was, but I just gave my sword a little shake. I told him I was the one asking questions and my patience was running thin. He gritted his teeth and finally confessed. He had stolen it from the Een family. My eyebrows shot up. I remembered that name. The Een family ran a famous hidden pawn shop in the capital. They were one of the 3 options the third prince had mentioned to me. I went silent for a moment. The Een family was powerful. A common bandit shouldn't have been able to steal something so precious from them. I asked what his real connection to them was. He took a deep breath, his eyes filled with hate. He told me the Eens were his enemies and that they had killed his mother. I wasn't satisfied with that vague answer. I told him to be specific. He looked like he wanted to argue, but one look at my blade made him swallow his pride. He explained that his mother had been a personal maid to the first lady of the Een family. That woman was the one who murdered her. It didn't take a genius to connect the dots. I asked if he was a bastard son of the Een family. The word bastard made his eyes snap wide with rage. He shouted, asking if bastards weren't allowed to live. I kept my voice calm. I told him the world didn't care about what was allowed or wasn't. If you have talent, no one can look down on you. But if he chose to live like a common thief in the woods, he couldn't blame people for despising him. He exploded with frustration. He told me he didn't want to hide in the mountains like a rat, but the first lady was still hunting him. If she found out he was alive, she'd kill him for sure. I rubbed my chin, thinking it over. I told him I could help him. He looked at me like I was crazy. He asked how, and more importantly, why. I laughed. I told him not to worry about the how. As for the why, because I felt like it. I told him I could hide him from the Een family's eyes, but there was a catch. He had to serve me for 10 years. He immediately refused, looking insulted. I offered 7 years. He still looked furious. I held up 5 fingers. I reminded him that protecting him wasn't free. He came from a merchant family, so he should understand that no one does business without a return. He went quiet for a long time. Finally, he muttered that he would give me 3 years. Deal, I said. I pulled back my sword and held out my hand. He hesitated, then shook it, though he looked like he felt cheated. I pulled him up and asked for his name. He told me it was Een Kwang. I gave him a thumbs up and told him it was a great, bold name. He looked like he wanted to punch me. I decided to change the subject before he snapped. I asked him if he knew where to find other rare treasures like the red fire iron essence. He frowned and thought for a second. He hadn't heard of any others, but he mentioned a manual in the Een family vault called the Heavenly Essentials. It supposedly listed all the rarest items in the world. The Heavenly Essentials. The name stuck in my mind. It felt like the universe was forcing me to go to the capital. Honestly, I didn't want to go. The capital was the heart of power in Great Shang. I knew how these political games worked. The Li family was a thorn in the emperor's side. We were too rich and too influential. If I went to the capital, I'd be walking into a spotlight. Once I entered those city gates, getting out wouldn't be easy. I told Yin Kwang he could go for now. I promised to make arrangements so he could eventually walk freely in the kingdom again. He gave a cold snort and disappeared into the trees. I turned and headed back toward Yuzhou City. I managed to slip through the gates just seconds before they slammed shut for the night. As soon as I got home, I sat down to write a letter to my second brother, Li Qingji. I needed him to handle Yin Kwang. If I ever went to the capital, that man would be a vital piece on the board. I didn't trust anyone else with this task. Even though my brother and I weren't exactly close, he was the only person I truly trusted. I tied the letter to a messenger pigeon and watched it fly off into the night. 2 days later, in the capital, a woman in red entered a lavish building by the river. She handed the secret letter to a young man dressed in silver-gray robes. It was Li Qingji. He read the letter by candlelight, his expression turning serious. He burned the paper in the flame. He looked at the woman, whose name was Hong Zhu, and told her to head to Yuzhou immediately. He told her to follow my every command. Then, he handed her a 3-foot-long wooden box containing a famous blade called the Pure Army Sword. He told her to give it to me. Back at the Li estate, I spent 5 days straight practicing my sword skills. I didn't go out to hunt bandits anymore since their leader was technically my employee now. On the 6th morning, a horse thundered up to the eastern gate. A beautiful, sharp-eyed woman in red arrived at our house. When I heard the news, I ran to meet her. I turned on the charm, calling her Sister Hongzhu, and telling her she must be exhausted from the trip. She bowed respectfully. She told me the Tower Master had sent her to follow my orders. I gave her my most innocent, harmless smile. I told her there was no need to be so formal. We were all on the same team now. I asked Sister Hongzhu to come inside because I needed a small favor. She bowed, telling me she would do whatever I commanded. Then, she took a 3-foot-long wooden box from her back and handed it to me. She said my second brother, the Tower Master, wanted me to have it. My eyes lit up. Anything my brother sent was bound to be a treasure. The scrap metal I'd taken from Yin Kwang wasn't a real sword yet, and I'd been worrying about where to find a decent blade. I couldn't exactly steal Qin Aluo's sword, even if I wanted to. I opened the box. A green ancient blade lay inside, quiet and cold. The edge looked like shimmering autumn water. It was sharp enough to cut through the air itself. It was a masterpiece. By the lake, Qin Aluo stared at the sword in my hands. Her expression shifted to genuine surprise. The Li family really did have eyes and ears everywhere. That was the Pure Army Sword, forged by a grandmaster a century ago. It had been missing for decades. The fact that my family found it proved their intelligence network was terrifying. Zhang Lada looked annoyed. He grumbled that a legendary blade was being wasted on a kid like me. Then he looked at Hongzhu. He noted that the girl in red was something special too. Qin Aluo nodded calmly. She pointed out that Hongzhu's earrings, hairpins, and bracelets all glinted with a faint blue light. They were coated in lethal poison. Zhang Lada wondered where the Li family found all these freaks. He watched me lead Hongzhu away and muttered that I clearly wasn't up to any good. Qin Aluo didn't disagree. She knew my character by now. I was the type of person who had no bottom line when I wanted something. I led Hongzhu toward my room, walking past my master and the old man with a straight face. Once we were inside, I shut the door. Hongzhu didn't look nervous. Instead, she gave me a playful, mocking smile. She had bullied me plenty when we were children. She knew I was all talk and no courage. She looked at my legs and made a comment about how much I'd grown. I stiffened, feeling like a deer in headlights. She took a step forward, reaching for my robes, claiming she wanted to check if I was really a man now. I stumbled back, telling her this wasn't a good idea. She just laughed, reminding me she'd seen everything back when we were kids. I told her I was older now, but she didn't stop. She reached out, her hand sliding down my chest. I panicked and backed up until my legs hit the bed. I lost my balance and fell backward, instinctively grabbing her for support. We tumbled onto the mattress together. For a split second, I felt triumphant. She was soft, fragrant, and right there in my arms. She asked me if I was comfortable. I told her I was. Then my hands moved instinctively, and I realized I had grabbed something I definitely shouldn't have. My heart stopped. Cold sweat broke out on my forehead. A second later, a blood-curdling scream echoed from my room. The servants in the courtyard froze in fear. By the lake, Qin Aluo and Zhang Lada actually smiled. It sounded like justice to them. Inside, I was curled up on the floor, clutching myself in agony. Hongzhu stood over me, cracking her knuckles with a dangerous glint in her eyes. She told me I really had grown up, grown enough to be bold. I shivered and begged her to talk about business instead. She sat at the table, finally cooling off. She told me she had ridden for 3 days and nights, killing several horses just to get here on time. I quickly poured her a cup of tea, playing the part of the obedient younger brother. I couldn't exactly fight back. She was the one holding the power here. I leaned in and whispered the plan. I told her about Yin Kuang, the bastard son of the powerful Yin family from the capital. He had been forced to become a bandit leader to survive. Now he worked for me. Hongzhu was surprised. She asked what I planned to do with him. I told her I needed her disguise skills. I wanted her to change his face and send him back to the capital as my pawn. She frowned, asking if the man could be trusted. I told her that wasn't her concern. She sighed and agreed. She promised to use a special disguise technique and keep the antidote ready, just in case he stepped out of line. I was thrilled. I reached out for a thank you hug, but she poked me hard in the forehead, stopping me in my tracks. She told me to go fetch the man. I hurried out of the room, feeling the lingering stares of Qin Aluo and Zhang Lada as I crossed the yard. I gave them a sheepish smile and kept moving. That scream had definitely sent the wrong message. At sunset, I sneaked Yin Kuang into the estate. He was wearing a straw hat to hide his face, but Qin Aluo recognized him instantly. I led him into the room where Hongzhu was waiting with her colorful bottles and tools. I told him he was in good hands, gave him a look of pity, and left him to his fate. I walked back to the lake, feeling much better. Zhang Lada asked me what I was doing with a bandit leader. I just grinned. It was a small matter, I told him. Qin Aluo looked at the closed door. She knew exactly who he was. Yin Kuang, the forgotten son of the Yin family. The game was finally moving to the capital. I didn't hold back the truth from Zhang Lada and Qin Aluo. I told them that the Scarlet Fire Iron scripture was something Yin Kuang had stolen directly from the Yin family's secret vault. The problem was, Yin Kuang didn't know where to find a matching extreme Yin item to balance the heat of that metal. He did, however, mention a legendary book held by the Yin family called the Celestial Records. It was said to contain locations and details of every rare treasure in existence. When I mentioned the name, Zhang Lada's eyes widened. He asked me if I was sure that book was with the Yins. I was surprised he even knew about it. The old man seemed to know everything. He explained that the author was a traveler from the era of the Great Shang's founding ancestor, a man who had seen every corner of the world. My heart raced. If I could get my hands on that book, I could find the materials to forge a sword that truly belonged to me. But Zhang Lada warned me that breaking into the Yin estate in the capital was just as dangerous as infiltrating the Imperial Academy. I knew that. That was exactly why I was turning Yin Kuang into my pawn. He knew the layout of his family home better than anyone. Qin Aluo watched me, her cold eyes seeing right through my plan. She asked if Hongzhu was going to use her disguise techniques on him. I nodded, calling her the smartest master I knew. I explained that I was going to give Yin Kuang a new face and send him back to the capital to wait for the right moment to strike. Zhang Lada just gave me a thumbs up, muttering that I was full of bad intentions. I took it as a compliment. Suddenly, a blood-curdling scream erupted from the room behind us. It ripped through the quiet night air. Zhang Lada jumped, asking why a simple disguise required so much screaming. I rubbed my nose, feeling a bit guilty. I told him I wanted to make sure no one could ever recognize him, So I asked Hongzhu to use some intensive methods to change his bone structure and appearance permanently. Zhang Lada looked horrified. He asked if the man could ever change back. I told him it depended on luck, but honestly, probably not. The old man shook his head, realizing that anyone who collaborated with me was constantly at risk of being sold out. Half an hour later, the door opened and Hongzhu stepped out, looking exhausted. I rushed over, asking if it worked. Since the others were watching, she started acting formal, but I told her she didn't need to put on an act around my master and the old man. She rolled her eyes and told me the man had fainted from the pain and wouldn't wake up for hours. Zhang Lada tried to pry into Hongzhu's past, asking who taught her such deadly arts. She just smiled and said she was self-taught. He didn't believe her for a second. People who master poison and disguise usually come from the southern border tribes, but she didn't look the part. Eventually, he gave up, stretched his old bones, and headed to bed. Qin Aluo stood up next. She looked at me and told me to stay focused on my sword practice instead of these schemes. I tried to defend myself, but she was already gone. Hongzhu laughed at my frustrated expression, teasing me about whether she wasn't good enough for me. It was a trap question, so I just stayed quiet. The conversation turned serious as we sat by the lake. Hongzhu asked if I was ready to go to the capital. My family had been setting up eyes and ears there for years, even though we hated imperial politics. I sighed, telling her I didn't want to go, but I knew I had no choice. The wind blew through her red dress, and for a moment, I remembered the day I found her. 10 years ago, she was a starving orphan on the streets of Yuzhou. Now, she was my most trusted ally. I told her that Li Manor would always be her home. She smiled, calling me a sweet talker, then stood up to leave. She told me she was taking Yin Kuang to the capital at dawn. My brother needed more people there, and they had to pave the way for my arrival. She warned me that the capital was a shark tank and that I needed to get stronger if I wanted to survive. I promised her I would become a sword immortal who would shake the world. She laughed and went to her room. I didn't sleep. I stayed by the lake, gripped my sword, and practiced the flying immortal technique. The first move had 9 steps. I had mastered 8, but the 9th step felt impossible. I fell, I crashed, and I bruised my body over and over. As the sun began to peek over the horizon, the door to the guest room opened. Hongzhu walked out, followed by a man with a face I had never seen before. The game in the capital had officially begun. The man standing before me looked nothing like Yin Kuang, but the eyes were the same. His face and build had been completely transformed. At that moment, I moved. My figure flashed through the backyard like a bolt of lightning or a startled swan. I cleared 8 steps in an instant, covering the distance with terrifying speed. Then came the final step. I leaped into the air, stomping down against the empty sky. My energy surged downward. As my foot hit the ground, a footprint an inch deep appeared in the stone. The world seemed to freeze for a split second. Then, a massive boom echoed through the yard. An arrow of pure force shot forward, and the decorative rock formation in front of me shattered instantly. Stone fragments flew everywhere, raining down like gravel. I landed, gasping for breath. My lungs burned. I was so exhausted I could barely keep my legs from buckling. Hongzhu rushed over and supported my weight. She whispered softly that while practice was important, I shouldn't push myself to the point of collapse. Across the yard, a door creaked open. Qin Aluo and Zhang Ladi walked out, drawn by the commotion. You succeeded? Qin Aluo looked at the pile of rubble, a hint of genuine surprise on her cold face. Not bad at all, Zhang Ladi added, grinning and showing off his large front teeth. I straightened my back, ignoring the fatigue. I looked at Hongzhu. Are you leaving now, Sister Hongzhu? She nodded. I turned to the stranger, the disguised Yin Kuang. Once you reach the capital, follow her orders in everything. Do you understand? I understand, Yin Kuang replied in a low, heavy voice. I walked them to the front gate. I watched the carriage disappear into the distance for a long time before turning back into the manor. The game had begun, and I was already feeling the weight of it. Back in the yard, Qin Aluo was waiting. She looked at Zhang Ladi. Sword crazy, you teach him the second move. Fine, the old man grunted. Kid, watch closely. He took a swig of wine and unsheathed his blade. His body moved like a swimming dragon, unpredictable and fluid. Every step he took was impossible to track. After 18 steps, his sword intent reached its peak. He gripped the hilt with both hands and swung. The world shook. A massive, ancient tree in the yard split perfectly down the middle and crashed to the ground. I stood there, speechless. The power was terrifying. "I'm getting old," Zhang Ladi muttered, shearing his sword and taking another drink. "A few years ago, I could have split half the Li estate with one strike. That would have been a real show." I snapped out of my shock and looked at the mess in the yard. "Please don't. You're plenty scary as you are. Practice hard," he said, patting my shoulder as he walked back to the lake. "There are 9 moves in total. The difficulty doubles with each one. The last 3, even Qin Aluo and I can't teach those to you. I hope before I'm in the dirt, I get to see you recreate the legendary 3 divine moves." I gave him a dry, nervous laugh. "Go practice," Qin Aluo commanded. I nodded and grabbed my sword, heading back to the clearing. By the lake, Qin Aluo watched me struggle. "This isn't working," she said quietly to Zhang Ladi. "He's too slow. The second move is fine, but the third has 27 steps. The fourth has 36. At this rate, it will take him years." Zhang Ladi sighed. "He's working hard, but he's only opened 1 energy gate. His speed and body control are limited." "I'm going to the capital," Qin Aluo said firmly. "I'll leave him to you." Zhang Ladi looked shocked. "You're actually going to the Imperial Academy? To see him? I have to try? We only know the location of 1 spirit medicine king. We have no choice. When do you leave?" "Today." Zhang Ladi didn't try to stop her. He just nodded. "I'll watch over the Li family." "Thank you." Qin Aluo pulled her green frost sword from the ground and walked away. I was busy failing the first 3 steps of the second move, pulling myself out of the dirt for the 10th time. I saw her leaving and shouted, "Hey, where's old Qin going?" "The capital," Zhang Ladi said casually. "The capital? What?" "To get you medicine," he replied. "Stop talking and keep swinging that sword." I watched her back as she disappeared. She didn't even say goodbye. Outside Yuzhou, Qin Aluo's figure blurred past Hongzhu's carriage like a ghost. 2 days later, she arrived at the capital of Great Shang. She made her way to a humble courtyard within the Imperial Academy. It was a simple place, filled with vegetables and clucking chickens. An old man in a plain robe was watering the greens. He looked ancient, wrinkled skin, cloudy eyes. But no one in the world dared to look down on him. This was Kong Qiu, the head of the academy, the man people called a living saint. He was undefeated within the walls of this city. "Are you here to save someone?" the old man asked without looking up. "No," Qin Aluo replied. "I'm here for an opening of gates." "Is the 3rd son of the Li family not a genius?" Kong Qiu asked. "No," she said. The old man chuckled. "I thought so. My calculations aren't that far off." Qin Aluo narrowed her eyes. "They said the head of the academy could read the heavens. It seemed the rumors were true. The 1,000-year root. I know the academy has it." "We do," Kong Qiu said, his tone shifting. "And we can give it to the Li boy, but not now." "What do you mean?" "When he comes to the academy, I will tell him myself." Qin Aluo frowned. "He won't come. He hates this city. He's resisting it with everything he has. Whether he comes or not is no longer his choice," the old man said, setting down his watering scoop. "Want to make a bet? If he arrives within 10 days, you, the Plum Blossom Sword Immortal, will teach at my academy for 1 year. If he doesn't, I give him the medicine with both hands." Qin Aluo hesitated, then nodded. "Fine, I'll take that bet." 10 days later, back at the Li Manor, a massive splash echoed through the backyard. I had fallen into the lake again. 11 times, Zhang Ladi shouted from the shore, sounding way too happy about my failure. "Old man, your mouth is the worst," I grumbled, crawling onto the bank and collapsing on the grass. "Where is old Qin? It's been 10 days. Maybe things didn't go well," Zhang Ladi sighed. "The academy is the saint's territory. No one takes things from him easily." "You keep mentioning this saint," I said, wiping water from my face. "Is he really that strong?" "Strong." Zhang Ladi looked at the sky. "Kid, that's an understatement. If he stays within the capital of Great Shang, the saint is the #1 man in the world," Zhang Ladi told me. I was stunned. That powerful. Zhang Ladi explained that the capital was the gathering place for all the scholars in the world. It created a massive, thick aura of righteous energy. As the teacher of all scholars, the saint could tap into that power. In the city, he was invincible. What exactly is this aura? I asked. It's something invisible and intangible, Zhang Ladi said after a moment of thought. Like the spiritual energy of heaven and earth. You can't see it or touch it, but it's real. Only someone at the saint's level can use it. Ordinary people can't. Not even me, and not even old Qin. I looked at him, surprised. Even you two can't? Our realm isn't high enough, he replied calmly. Aren't you both already sword immortals? I asked, confused. Is there a level higher than that? Yes, he said. The human body has 5 major internal organs. These correspond to the 5 divine treasuries of a practitioner. Every time you open one, you step into a new realm. There are 5 realms in total. Both Qin Aluo and I have opened all 5. We are practitioners of the 5th realm. The title Sword Immortal is just a name commoners use. He paused, his gaze turning distant. Legend says that above the 5th realm, there is something more. A master who reaches that peak can condense their weapons and gather the 3 flowers of vitality. On the day they succeed, they ascend. A mortal becomes an immortal. I felt a jolt of shock. That sounds like complete nonsense. Does anyone actually ascend? I've never seen it, Zhang Ladi said dryly. Personally, I think it's nonsense too. Just listen and forget it. In the last 1,000 years, only the saint has possibly touched that level. Then isn't the saint basically invincible? At least in the capital, yes, Zhang Ladi nodded. But he rarely leaves the city. No one knows if he has truly crossed the 5th realm or how far past it he has gone. It remains a mystery. I remembered something. What about the first sword god from 1,000 years ago? He was probably on the same level as the saint, Zhang Ladi mused. But it was too long ago. No one can be sure. I sighed, feeling a mix of envy and worry. If the saint is that strong, will old Qin be okay? Zhang Ladi shook his head. The saint isn't a murderer. Besides, with Qin Aluo's strength, even if she can't win, she can definitely escape. Just as we finished talking, a servant hurried into the backyard. Young master, a letter has arrived from the capital. I took the letter, my curiosity quickly turning into a cold, dark rage. My face went pale, then sank into a shadow of fury. Zhang Ladi sensed the change immediately. He had lived at the Li Manor for a long time, but he had never seen me this angry. What happened? My sister is in trouble, I said, my voice low and dangerous. I stood up. Old Zhang, I'm going to the capital. What was meant to come has finally arrived. I can't hide from it anymore. Now? Zhang Ladi asked. Right now. I nodded and turned toward the study. My father probably already knew. Inside the study, Li Baiwan sat behind his desk. The usual cheerful smile was gone. His face was filled with a murderous intent that I had rarely seen. I pushed the door open. Old Li, I'm going to the capital. Good, my father said, his voice heavy. Be careful. Remember, no matter what you do, the Li family is your strongest shield. I know. I turned to leave, but he called out to me one last time. Son, he asked, are you going to keep hiding your true self? I stopped, looking back with a calm expression. Of course, when I arrive, the heir of the Li family will finally show his true colors. I won't be the genius the rumors claim. I'll be an arrogant, self-righteous son of a wealthy merchant. I'll have a bit of petty cleverness, but no real talent. I'll be a troublemaker who doesn't know his own limits. I paused, a cold smile touching my lips. People love the satisfaction of exposing a lie. When they see my true face for themselves, they'll believe it without question. If I act like a fool, I won't be a threat. They'll tolerate a loud-mouthed fake much more than a real genius. My father went silent for a long time. Finally, he nodded. I'll follow your lead. Ever since your second uncle disappeared, you've become much more cautious. It had been nearly 10 years. My second uncle was still missing without a trace. Don't mention him, I said coldly, turning my back and walking out. Half an hour later, a fleet of carriages gathered in front of the Li Manor. The first carriage was mine. Every carriage behind it was loaded to the brim with gold, silver, and precious jewels. And, of course, there was one carriage filled entirely with fine wine for Zhang Ladi. I really was born to work, The old man grumbled as he watched the wine being loaded. The capital has even better wine, I promised him. If you want to drink it, I'll buy it all for you. At least you have a conscience, he sighed, climbing into the carriage. I followed him inside, and the caravan began its long journey out of Yuzhou City. My father stood at the gates, watching us disappear into the distance. We both knew the dangers of the capital, but the time for hiding was over. Someone had reached out to slap us. We weren't going to just stand there and take it. The Li family didn't look for trouble, but we weren't afraid of it either. Half a day passed as the caravan rumbled along the road. Inside the lead carriage, Zhang Ladi drank his wine in silence. He was only there to keep me alive. Everything else was my business. I sat with my eyes closed, using every spare second to practice the flying immortal technique. I had opened my first divine treasury 2 weeks ago, but I was still in the early stages of the first realm. I was a long way from a breakthrough. The dust kicked up behind us. Every person in this caravan was a trusted member of the Li household. Even the maids had been thoroughly vetted. I had spent years resisting the capital, but I had also spent years preparing for the day I would eventually have to go. The sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. As night fell, we set up camp. A dozen men took turns patrolling the perimeter, alert for any danger. The wilderness was cold at night, so we lit several bonfires to stay warm. I sat by the fire, staring into the dancing flames. Zhang Ladi tossed a jar of wine toward me. Drink some. It'll take the chill off. Thanks. I caught it and took a long swig. I could feel the coldness in my eyes reflecting the fire. Once we reach the capital, you need to be careful, Zhang Ladi warned. It's a place of hidden dragons and crouching tigers. It's not like Yuzhou where you can do whatever you want. I know, I said, taking another drink. The liquid burned all the way down. This is good stuff. It's monkey wine, Zhang Ladi said calmly, staring into the dark woods. Enjoy it while you can. Save some for yourself, I said, handing the jar back. I know you don't have much of this left. I was surprised he was willing to share such a hidden treasure. I took one last long gulp, wiped my mouth with the back of my hand, and tossed the jar back to him. I couldn't afford to get drunk. I had to practice my sword forms. Old Zhang looked at me, his expression serious. You don't need to be in such a rush, he warned. Everything has its limit. If you push too hard, your body won't be able to handle the strain. I understand, I replied, nodding slowly. I'll be careful. But old Zhang, tell me the truth. With my current cultivation, what are my chances against someone like the third prince? 0, he said bluntly. The truth stung. He explained that Mu Yao had already opened his second divine treasury. He was an entire realm above me. In the world of martial arts, a single realm was like the distance between heaven and earth. Crossing that gap to defeat someone stronger was nearly impossible. Old Zhang paused, his voice softening slightly. You started late. Your natural talent isn't superior to theirs. It's only normal that you're behind the third prince right now. Just take it slow. If you can master the flying immortal technique, your future achievements won't lose to anyone. I'm afraid I don't have that much time, I whispered. I didn't want to talk anymore. I grabbed my Chunjun sword and walked away from the warmth of the fire. I began practicing the second style of the flying immortal technique. Old Zhang watched me from the shadows of the camp. I could feel his gaze on me, filled with a strange mix of pity and respect. He knew I was rushing into the capital too early. But he also knew something else about me. I was ruthless. I wasn't just hard on my enemies. I was brutal to myself. In his eyes, I was a madman. A loud crash echoed through the wilderness. My sword light sliced through the air, and a massive boulder shattered into pieces. I repeated the movements again and again. My progress was slow, but it was visible. By dawn, I was so exhausted I could barely move. My muscles screamed in protest, but I forced myself to sit cross-legged. This was the moment when day and night shifted, the time when the world's spiritual energy was at its peak. I began circulating the internal mantra of the flying immortal technique. Half an hour later, the caravan began to stir. The men were packing up, getting ready to move out. I opened my eyes and exhaled a cloud of turbid air. Inside my chest, the sea of true essence within my divine treasury felt significantly larger than yesterday. It seemed the technique worked best when I was pushed to the brink of total collapse. I clenched my fists, feeling the new strength. If that was the case, I hadn't been hard enough on myself yet. Old Zhang watched me climb back toward the carriage and shook his head helplessly. "Madman," he muttered. He crawled into his seat, thinking back to his own youth. He realized that if he had possessed even half of my drive back then, he never would have lost that legendary duel against the master from the western regions. I stood by the carriage for a moment and looked toward the east. The sun was rising, casting a cold light over the horizon. "Sister Yue, I'm coming," I whispered to the wind. The Li family wasn't a target people could just bully and walk away from. Not while I was breathing.